glad to have you join us. It's a beautiful sunny day where I am at today, and so hoping it's the same with you. On behalf of entire PSCC board and members, I'd like to give special recognition to all of you for taking the time to participate this week. We truly appreciate it, especially in this virtual world. Our ability to deliver this event, which is pillar to our mission, would not be possible without our sponsors. We thank all of them at all levels. At our Oak Tree sponsor, we thank the Nature Conservancy, Grand Victoria Foundation, Gaylord and Dorothy Donnelly Foundation, as well as Open Lands. And then as well as our Oak Leaf sponsors, Heartlands Conservancy, the Conservation Foundation, the law offices of George Covington, Cardno, and the Davie Resource Group. I'd also like to give a huge thank you to the Conservation Foundation. They not only lent us their Zoom license for this event, but trained our board on how to do this. Let me tell you, it was a big feat. And behind the scenes, Jamie from the Conservation Foundation is there for our tech support today, and we'll be running the show. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put something in the chat for her directly if you're having some technical aspects. A few housekeeping requests. Please mute yourselves until the question and answer portion of the session. It's also suggested that you turn off your camera unless you're presenting. I'll be monitoring the chat along with Sandy and Ryan and Jamie. So you can also raise your hand with the emoji if you want to ask any direct questions. Please feel free at any time. Send me a direct message if I can help out at all. And Sandy will be putting into the chat copies of the agenda as well as the evaluation form. The evaluation form really helps us with our programming for next year. So without further ado, as you can see there, I'd like to kind of kick off our day. As you can see, we have a busy day. It's going to be a great day. So glad you're here. We're starting out with our PSCC legislative review. Of course, our IDNR updates. We have a new thing this year because of COVID, our virtual events and programs updates. So we're going to learn a little bit about what others have done and what we can do. We'll go into easement violations and fee property encroachments. And then Susie Hoffman will be rounding out our day with the Lake Forest Open Lands Center for Conservation Leadership. And I sure hope you can all join me. I don't have a beer here or a glass of wine like I usually would see in the bar, but I hope you can join us at the end for some cocktails and discussion where we can hang out together virtually. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jim Herkert, and he will introduce our first speaker. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan, and welcome to day 2 of the PSCC annual meeting. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Jen Walling, who's going to give us the legislative review. Jen's the executive director of the Illinois Environmental Council. Jen just celebrated her 10th year with IEC, so congratulations on that. IEC is an organization that serves and represents over 90 affiliated organizations. In my opinion, it is the environmental voice on legislative matters in the state, and we're very lucky to have Jen and her crew at the helm of that. Jen holds a BS and MS degree from the University of Illinois. Her MS is from Natural Resources and Environmental Science, and she also holds a law degree from the University of Illinois. So again, it's my pleasure to welcome Jen.
Great, thank you all so much. I'm really excited that I'm the one able to present to you. I know we normally may have Lindsay Keeney, our conservation director, or Elliot Clay, our Ag and Water Programs director, but it being a real strange session time, I'm excited to come back and talk with you all. Please feel free if you have questions about any bill to put it in the chat. I'm scheduled to go to 12:15, which is 7 minutes, so I'm going to run through my slides, and then if we have questions, I can always answer them by email later. But I think a lot of you are members of the Illinois Environmental Council, and we are a coalition of environmental groups and work on lobbying and representing all of those groups at the state level. But we also are registered lobbyists at the city of Chicago, MWRD, Cook County, and working on how we can broaden that approach. We also are doing a little bit of federal work at this point too. And our staff is going to be up to 16 people this year. You can see all of us in a Voyager canoe in Emaquan. a couple years ago. Hopefully we get back to those staff retreats. And I know many of you are just valuable members of IEC, so thanks for everything you do. I'm going to gloss over this, but we're spending a lot of time on climate change, but from the energy sector point of view, and I'm going to end this with where we are going in terms of the nature-based solutions point of view related to climate, because conservation is really important to that as well. I know a lot of you have probably heard of the Clean Energy Jobs Act. There are discussions as part of the Clean Energy Jobs Act about siting and the way that transmission and other items may intersect or interfere with natural conservation. So just keep that in mind. I know those discussions are happening. We're not forgetting about that, but aiming to put together a bill to go to 100% clean energy by 2050 this year. Another one of our biggest proposals this year is going to be the Partners for Nutrient Loss Reduction Act. And I think all of you know about Illinois, what we think is Illinois' top water quality problem, which is nutrient pollution. Although actually I say that, and we polled on how to talk about the pollution that comes to our waterways from phosphorus and nitrogen. And with this specific agriculture related item, we should be referring to it as polluted runoff from farm fertilizer. I know it comes from a lot of sources, but when we're talking about this particular issue, that's the polling strategy that works. So working on our messaging. But I know a lot of you are aware of those issues in the nutrient loss reduction strategy. So we've put together a bill, and I have to, Sierra Club did a ton of work writing this, negotiating it, having support for it. But it basically is an extension of the Partners for Conservation Fund, which sunsets in 2021. And in the bill, it seeks to increase investment in the Partners for Conservation Fund by a substantial amount. So not only do we need to pass this bill that extends it and increases its purpose, but we also need to make sure there are appropriations for it, which seems really hard in a budget cut year, but it is something that we are working to do and have some ideas on. So look for this, the Partners for Nutrient Loss Reduction Strategy Act. I know a lot of you are involved in the bobcat hunting work. There is a bill that prohibits bobcat hunting up this year. I don't have bill numbers on a lot of these because all of this stuff just happened. I also wanted to run through some of the sustainable agriculture priorities that we're working on. There are some really neat pieces that we have on pesticides that I actually think we could get done this year. There's some restrictions on pesticides on state property, especially neonicotinoids, that we're working to pass. Also banning pre-treated seeds and ethanol production. There was a state that an ethanol plant used neonic-treated seeds in ethanol production, causing a huge water quality problem. And typically it's not done, but making sure that it doesn't happen here, really important. Also a number of local food purchasing requirements that we're working on with the Stewardship Alliance. Not totally related to this work, but close. I also will say there is a bill that's been introduced that increases some of the pesticide fines for people that are hurt by pesticide pollution. Environmental Law and Policy Center is leading that one. And basically a number of workers at a particular farm were sprayed with pesticides, became ill, and the entire fine to I don't think it was a farmer, to the applicator was $750 for about 40 people getting sick. And under the Pesticide Act, one person is worth about 5 cows. So just making sure that we are extending those fines to be more reasonable. I know I've worked with a lot of you on the Pesticide Act and how it intersects with dicamba, and making sure that we have appropriate fines there. It's still not enough, especially for pesticide drift to trees, but another issue that we are working on. Another item I just wanted to bring to folks' attention is the environmental justice permitting. We're definitely going to be working on a bill that changes some of the requirements for getting a permit for any type of pollution, whether it's air, water, land pollution, that does a cumulative impact look at environmental justice communities. And I think that this can intersect land conservation work in a number of ways. There may be offsets that the companies are looking to do in the community benefit agreements that could very well be open space. But just looking at the cumulative impact on these communities and how nature-based solutions can assist, really important. And I want to end just a little bit. I know a lot of you have been invited, and we've been working on the 30% by 2030 international campaign and forming a table to work on this in Illinois. It's sort of a 30 by 30 and nature-based climate solution. So a focus on 30% by 2030 and the climate items that it puts together. So here's a little bit more information on it, but really excited that President Biden signed an executive order to try to reach these goals. Of course, in Illinois, a little more about what happened. In Illinois, we're at a point where, I don't know, David Holman has the exact numbers, but we're at like 4.1% preserved natural area. So for us, how do we think about all of the different types of conservation practices that will contribute to carbon sequestration in a natural way? So talking about community-driven land conservation, sustainable agriculture practices such as cover crops, how do we increase our local food economy, and how do we do this all while promoting jobs, equity, and economic opportunity, particularly in communities of color? So really interesting space, and I really encourage you all to reach out and join us to be part of the listening sessions to put together this table that is sort of modeled off the Clean Jobs Coalition, but is about nature-based solutions to climate change. So if you're not already part of that, I'll put my email in the chat. We're just really working on this table, and our aim is to have a policy package, and it'll be a little different than the Clean Energy Jobs Act in many ways. But one of the ways that it will be different is we're looking at local components and federal components that might be part of a stratified package, because there is important work on the Cook County Forest Preserve District referendum and other local work that can make really big changes to nature. So just in ending, I will tell you, here's my email, here's our website, and sign up and follow us. It is a weird session. Committee deadline is March 26th. Committees are all remote. They haven't met in person yet. I'm not sure when they will. I'm not sure when lobbyists will be there. So definitely a different time. So I'm at 12:15. So I will stop sharing, but are there any quick questions I should answer? Nothing in the chat, but I will, it's really good to see all of you. And I'm going to put my info there if you have questions. So I don't know, Jim, should we take any, or we should move on?
I think we can take some time for a question or two if anyone's got one.
We don't want to take time away from Ann Holtrup.
But we did take 6 minutes off of you at the beginning
That's
here.
true. That's true. That's true. Ann Holtrup, who is on our way to achieving our very first Monarch decal for license plates. It's almost done. Almost done.
We're working on it.
we're the first group to ever achieve the threshold for the new decals. So very exciting. Any questions anybody has? And DNR funding, of course, we're going to be working on. The governor's proposed budget doesn't look too bad for DNR funding, despite the 10% across the board cuts. Yeah, so looks like there are no questions. So I think I'll just wait.
All right, so if there's any further questions, just throw them in the chat or get a hold of Jen. And thanks again, Jen, to you and your team for all the great work you do representing us in Springfield. It's really important work, and we're glad to have you guys working on it.
Thanks.
So, all right, we're gonna switch gears now. We're gonna, it's my pleasure to introduce Anne Marie Holtrup, who is the chief of the Division of Natural Heritage within the Department of Natural Resources. The Division of Natural Heritage is the division in the DNR that oversees natural areas. It oversees the Endangered and Threatened Species Program. It's where the Natural Heritage Database resides, and a number of other important functions for all of us. Anne's been chief, I'm guessing here, I think Anne's been chief for 4 years, and I think she was acting for 2, maybe 3 before that. So at least 6 or 7 years you've been in that role, something along those lines.
We're losing track, Jim. Something like that.
And so again, it's my pleasure to introduce Anne, who's going to give us an update on things at the DNR and the Natural Area Stewardship Act. Take it away, Anne.
Sure. Okay. Well, let me just follow up on what Jen said, because I knew she was going to ask me about that sticker and I didn't put it in here. But so according to the ad rules, we had to prepare a sample. We got that over to Secretary of State and they said, boy, that's really small. We think we'd like it bigger. And we're like, we wanted it bigger from the start. So we're working with them. I think even though their ad rules aren't changed, they want it bigger. So we're going to work on getting it bigger, and hopefully we're going to keep, well, we will keep going here, but we made it to the point we had a draft and they just didn't like it. So we're still moving though. Okay. So I'm going to touch on 3 things today as terms of high level categories here. You may recall that DNR used to produce an Outdoor Illinois magazine. Many of you probably subscribed to it or had seen it. Beautiful pictures, great articles. A couple years ago, it changed to an online platform, and the articles contained in the journal were limited by the funding sources that was used to make that transition. So mostly birds and mammals with an emphasis on harvested species. This year, Heritage partnered with the Division of Wildlife and the staff at the journal, and we've added some different funding. So what that means for all of us is we have a different platform, another platform to share some of our stories. So natural areas and rare species stories are now on the site, along with video clips, and we would welcome additional contributions to this. We don't want it to be just DNR stories. So please, if there's stories you want to get out there, consider this platform. You can work with me. Jenny Skufka's on the session here and others, and we'll connect you to the editors, and we'll make sure your stories get included. Okay, we're going to transition to some protection activities, and we're going to start with species, because as we talk about communication, monarch just kind of comes into the story. We've been spending a lot of time on monarchs, and the state's collective planning efforts culminated on just a beautiful day in September. We were outside at Conservation World on the state fairgrounds, and we had the directors of Department of Agriculture, Illinois EPA, Department of Natural Resources, and Department of Transportation, and they gathered to sign Illinois' Monarch Action Plan, our first statewide plan for monarchs. The event was live streamed, and it's been followed by some virtual engagements. And so I've listed them there just in case you've missed them. You can certainly listen to the recordings. We have one more coming up in May. And I mention this because the focus is going to be action on the ground, and all of us here have ground. We're ready to do more pollinator work or have the work that we're doing counted into the statewide effort. The natural land sector is in a phase of transitioning to some new leadership. So we've tapped Susan Lentz and Julie Krasinski to help formalize an ask of the natural land sector. So this is sort of a heads up to all of you that something good is going to be coming your way between now and probably that May event on something we can rally around as conservation organizations and get more pollinator habitat on the ground. Okay. DNR is ramping up our recovery efforts for plants and animal species that are listed as threatened or endangered in Illinois, and we're putting really renewed emphasis on surveys. We've initiated several habitat modeling efforts to guide surveys for species like the Franklin's ground squirrel that's pictured here, Illinois chorus frog, spotted dusky salamander, Hall's bulrush, and other species as well. So we're using these model outputs to help us identify potential habitats for species and then target our surveys in those places. And we're finding new locations based on these models, so they're working. I mention this because I think right now we have really an incredible opportunity to use the protected lands data that David Holman created in iView to identify willing landowners, all of you, to help us manage these species and maybe do assessments. So if you're interested in some of this, contact us, and we just have some great tools now, I think, where we can look at all of our lands together and look at shared management opportunities. All right, shifting gears to natural communities, we've made some progress in this arena as well. The Natural Areas Evaluation Committee is DNR's technical committee that provides oversight to the Illinois Natural Areas Inventory. So additions, deletions, boundary changes, all that good stuff. As personnel in our Natural Areas program changed over the last year or two, we hadn't been able to hold these NAEC meetings very often. And so there were several folks, entities waiting for something to come on the inventory. In December, we changed that and we held our ADS meeting virtually, of course. Well, now it's not a requirement that sites are on the inventory before they go to the Nature Preserves Commission for dedication and registration. Most oftentimes sites are on the inventory before that protection is sought with the commission. And so during the ADS meeting, we had 6 sites that we discussed and 4 new sites were added, including Lost Flora Fen, which is a site that many of us have heard of, owned by Natural Land Institute, 61 acres, high quality sedge meadow, and habitat for some really cool species, federally endangered Hines emerald dragonfly and Blanding's turtle. So the good news for all of you seeking to add sites to the inventory is that we have scheduled additional meetings, and this is going to become more commonplace again. If you have sites that you'd like to be evaluated for inclusion, please talk, chat, email me, Jenny Skufka, or someone else from Heritage, and we'll get you connected to the right people. We are also updating documents such as the standards and guidelines, and even revamping our files, application files. We had paper, we love paper, we're moving to digital. So we're trying to get everything better organized, more accessible, and by all means talk to us and we'll help you navigate all the changes. All right, DNR remains committed to doing our part to dedicate and register portions of our property in the nature preserve system. We currently have 82 land and water reserves and 133 nature preserves. So since the last PSCC meeting, we've successfully brought 2 sites to INPC, the John Hussar Memorial Addition to Franklin Creek up in Lee County, and then the Ralph Clover Land and Water Reserve down in Jackson County. This is a Toothless Cave parcel. So we're working statewide on our properties. There's 2 more in addition to these 2 that we anticipate bringing to the May meeting, and in McHenry County and Johnson County. And our goal is to continue to bring sites more frequently to the commission meeting, and we're aiming for 2 a meeting. And I mention that because as we queried staff and really thought about what opportunities exist on our properties, we identified about 40. So it's going to take us 3 to 5 years to get these all through the system, but really exciting, and wanted to let you know that we do have sort of an agenda for the sites that we're moving, and looking forward to working with all of you on these, both as a landowner and then as a partner through the Natural Areas program and with the inventory. Okay, so we've arrived at the stewardship conversation that you're all waiting for, and well, almost. I'm going to make you wait just a second longer before we talk about grants. But in the department, we recognize that the need for stewardship on lands, both our own and throughout the state, is great, and we all want to use our resources and funding as efficiently as we can. So I really want to shout out here to a couple of our staff, in particular, Todd Stroll, Michelle Simoni, they're from Heritage, Mitch Hess is from Wildlife, and Nicole Burgie is with our procurement section. Along with others, they really dared to think differently about how we could procure our work and how we could contract stewardship vendors. They're trying something really innovative to make our stewardship contracting process within DNR more efficient. And I don't know if something like this would work for any of you, but I want to throw it out there because it might. Essentially what we're doing is we're going to go through one large bidding process, and we're then going to stand up master contracts for geographic areas and certain types of activities. And once we do that, we'll be able to apply work orders toward those big contracts rather than individually bidding each project. And so the bid posting is currently open right now. Actually, I think a pre-bid meeting started about 5 minutes ago. We expect about 40 vendors to be partaking in this effort. I mean, we're talking about $8 million that will be part of this contract. So this is a big thing for us. And if it works, it's really going to change the way we do business and procurement for stewardship activities. Okay. So grants, drum roll, please. We've arrived at this part that I know you're all waiting for. First and foremost, we have a website that has some information. I'm going to drop here in the chat, I think, the link to the website, but I know our website isn't super user-friendly, and so you may not be able to find it. This one isn't too bad to find. If you go to the main website and you look at that main header, you'll see grants and procurement over here. If you click that drop down, the Natural Area Stewardship Grant is the last one on the bottom. It's the newest thing to be added. So as we get information, we're putting it here, and we'll be able to get you what you need here on this site. A reminder that we're talking about eligible lands being Nature Preserve Commission owned sites with current and approved management plans. They're either owned by a conservation land trust, or there's an agreement between the landowner and the conservation land trust that they can apply on the landowner's behalf. And that letter is shared with the commission. And then there's a set of eligible expenses, which are identified on the website, but things like the actual stewardship activity, contractual services, purchases or rental of necessary equipment, staff time, excluding the benefits, and indirect cost. We can certainly talk about those, but I just wanted to make sure everybody knew what we were talking about as we get into this grant program. Okay. Oops. Okay. So I know one of the things Jim wanted me to talk about is like the grant preparation and how we can help all of you get ready to go. And so the first thing is everybody's got to be registered on the State of Illinois grantee portal. And there's a link in this slide. I can get that out to you afterwards as well, so you'll have it. It's on the website along with some assistance if you need it on how to get on there. The other thing that you'll need to do in your application is talk about the relevancy of your project to these 3 plans that I have listed on the slide. This was in the statute, so it's something that we have to ask on the application. 2 of these, the Natural Areas Plan and the Natural Areas Vision, are kind of older documents and they can be hard to find, but they are linked on the website. All 3 of these are linked on the website, and so you can get those there. Once you get into the application, DNR will provide you like a set of questions or some kind of guidance to help you determine that relevancy and make your statement as good as it can be. I mean, we don't want to read a whole lot of it's tangentially related to these massive plans either. So we want to help you be as clear and concise as you can be with that section. All right, and then, oh, okay. So big news. We really do anticipate the notice of funding opportunity coming out April 1. I can't guarantee that, but I've seen a draft. We're working with our grant staff. We think we're ready to go. So this is what we're moving toward. It would be open for 60 days. The applications would be open for 60 days so that it would close May 31st. That would mean projects would be announced in like August, and then the agreements would start in September. We'll say I'm a little more optimistic about the call being issued April 1 than I am about grants starting September, and only because I'm not sure how quickly all of this is going to work. The website currently says that announcements are made within 180 days following application, so they're giving themselves more like 6 months there as opposed to like 3 in this timeline. But anyway, I think some really good progress has been made here. We're really excited to work with all of you. We're eager to get started. I know all of you are too. And with that, I will open it up for questions. I've got my name and email here and phone number. The length of the agreements would be up to 2 years.
And we've also got a question in the chat. Could a land trust apply for a grant to do stewardship on DNR land as long as DNR supported it?
Yeah, I don't see any reason why that couldn't happen.
All right.
And yes, of course, Fran Hardy and folks were really instrumental in this many years ago. So it's a nice fruition for many of the folks that have worked on this.
All right. So I think, if you're going to be here, maybe just keep some questions going in the chat if
Yeah.
maybe we'll do that.
Yep.
Agreed. Thanks to Fran and for his work on this. Thanks to Jen and IEC for their work on getting this through. And a big thank you to the Department of Natural Resources for taking that legislation and turning it into an act. I know that's been a long process as well, and we really appreciate all your work on that. So it's
Sure.
this is one of those cases where all the stars align and everything's gone to where we want it to be. So thanks for that. And Ann, thanks for spending some time with us. And now I'm going to turn it over to Susan, who's going to move us on.
All right, everyone. So our next session is the virtual events and roundtable program brought to you by COVID this year. So we've learned some things and excited to share them with each other. So what I'm going to do is I'll call on each of our presenters. And at that time, Jamie will give you the capability to share your screen if that's something that you wish to do. The first person I would like to present is Brooke McDonald, and he's going to talk with the Conservation Foundation, their online Earth Day fundraiser, which they did. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Jamie, can I share?
You should be able to, Brooke.
Everybody see that okay?
Looks great.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, so I'm going to talk about our virtual Earth Day Benefit Week fundraiser we did last April. We just sort of made this up because we had to cancel our regular event. I think we may have been one of the first groups to figure out a way to do a virtual fundraiser just on a few weeks' notice. So for about 30 years, like many of you, we've held a traditional banquet style fundraiser. It's been very popular. We get 500 or 600 people to come, dinner, auction, raffle, all the traditional things. People like it. Some affectionately called it the prom for nature nerds. But, you know, people would come back every year and we'd raise about $150,000, maybe $160,000. And we always did it around Earth Day. So here it was March of last year. We have our sponsors in, we have people buying tickets online, we have our auction items in, and we're printing our formal invitations that we mail out because a lot of our patrons like to do things the old fashioned way. We're hearing about this virus, not really sure what's going to happen. And we get to about mid-March or shortly thereafter, and the governor sends everyone home. And this is like 3.5 weeks before our Earth Day benefit dinner with 500-600 people coming. So to make a long story short, we canceled it, talked about what we would do instead, talked about maybe moving something to May, decided to stick with the Earth Day theme because it was the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And we just said, we'll make something up and see how it goes. So this is what we made up. We made up the Earth Day Virtual Benefit Week. It was an 8-day campaign. Sort of think of like a capital campaign, but done in 8 days, with each day being a little different, trying to make money and trying to engage people. So we used videos. We made homemade videos. We asked people just to shoot videos and send them in. So we made a bunch of videos with testimonials. We used email, social media, the website, online silent auction. It was the first time we did a totally online silent auction and actually made more money than we ever have in the past. We sold virtual tickets. And if you bought a virtual ticket, then you got a $25 gift certificate to a local restaurant that you could use to patronize that a restaurant when they opened. And of course, people were able to make donations both online and through the mail. So what was sort of fun is that every day started with an RE word. So we themed every day up with words starting with RE. again, the context was COVID, stay at home, 50th anniversary. So the first day was reconnect. We tried to, all of these themes tied back to our mission and some of our programs. So there was a marketing element to it: restore, revitalize, reimagine, retreat. So every day there was a video and a series of messages and stories that went on around each one of these words: reserve, responsibility, and resilience. So this is, these were our 8 words over the 8 days with the themes, the messages. The auction was open. It was just a way to sort of engage people on a day-to-day basis during this 8-day period in our virtual event. So this is an example of one of the emails we sent out. So this would be day 6. You could click on the bottom at the button to browse and bid on the auction items. That culminated on the last day, which was Earth Day, April the 22nd. You could make donations online. So we sent those out. This is an example. You can see that our graphics were all themed up. This is an example of a social media post. This was our daily website posts, again, with videos and stories, blog posts. Just again, trying to engage people and keep people, focused on Earth Day. Some lessons learned. Well, we learned that our team members were very quick to change and are very adaptable. And I remember Jill, our communications manager, would tell me on a day-to-day basis. I'd say, well, what are we doing tomorrow? Well, we think we're doing this, but we're just sort of making this up. And again, we only had 3.5 weeks to pivot on this, and it ended up being pretty good. I was pretty impressed with how they did this. We also learned that people were very generous. I don't know if people felt sorry for us or what, but I tell you, people were very generous with their money and really got into the auction items and bidding on the auction items. And our sponsors stuck with us, and this is a great story. We had about 45 table sponsors at the time before we canceled it. And, many of them had already sent in their checks. So, they certainly were going to ask for their money back. But there were several who had verbally told us they were going to sponsor, but had not yet sent in their checks. And so we contacted them. They were like, yeah, we're going to send in our check. We support you. So that was really great. We also learned that people are pretty computer savvy, that they're able to do this either on their phone or their laptop. And we netted about $130,000. That's less than what we normally would have netted during a live event, but we thought that was pretty good considering the situation. So just real quickly, this year, we have the benefit of knowing well ahead of time that we are not going to have an in-person event. So we've had some time to plan. So we're doing sort of a hybrid this year. So this year we are scheduling a month-long event with a focus on between April 7 and 22. The goal is to do something different, something fun and engaging, and of course, try to make as much money as we can. So it's going to be sort of a hybrid small group and virtual event. We're going to hold 5 small in-person events in each of the counties that we work in. One in DuPage, Kane, Kendall, and DuPage, Kane, Kendall, and Will. And then a final one, sort of a wrap-up session. So a 5th one. Right now it's 50 people. Probably will still be 50 people, but if it goes up to 75, that would be even better. We're going to have food, drinks, and live local bands. They'll be held outside. And if they get rained out, then we're going to reschedule these. We're going to have a trivia night. We're going to hold some webinars, live stream some tours and other events, and do some family education activities here at our McDonald farm. Also online silent auction, and again, donations. So between the sponsors, we have a whole new sponsorship package this year because we know we're not going to have a sit-down dinner. So between the online, the new sponsorship packages and the silent auction, that brings in about 3/4 of all the revenue for this event. And we're also going to sell both in-person and virtual tickets to these events. So that's just a real quick overview of what happened last year, what we're planning this year. And I think my time's probably up, Susan.
Thank you so much, Brooke. That's exciting. I love it. I'm going to ask, we're going to go on to our next presenter. And if you do have any questions for Brooke or any of the presenters that will be coming up, you can place them in chat, or at the end, we will have time where you can raise your hand and we'll address all the presenters at that time. Thanks, Brooke. Now on to Susie Hoffman, and she's going to talk about Lake Forest Open Lands and their virtual conservation cocktails. Susie?
Great. Thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. Thanks, Brooke. That sounded really creative and fun. And I want to share a couple of things that we did in 2020 in response to COVID. The one that I'm tasked with talking about right now is our conservation cocktails, which is a monthly Friday evening event where we invite people to come to the preserve, to our headquarters, have a cocktail, do a little socialization, and then take a hike, listen to a speaker. Usually that speaker will hike with us. We'll learn about birds or bats or trees or plants, all sorts of different things. And we were doing pretty well with that. We loved doing it. People were coming out and enjoying that cocktail and the camaraderie. But obviously that stopped cold when COVID happened. So like many other things, we decided to do that virtually. And we learned through doing it that our reach was so much greater. As I'm sure you all noticed when you went to virtual content, we really had many more people coming from many different places all across the country to participate in this. So we started those up again in June. We kind of, like Brooke, we kind of were reeling. Brooke, you put that together really quickly, and I'm so impressed. But we took a little more time, and we started again in June with this virtual content. We learned about bats. We learned about the orchids of Illinois. We learned about the state of our trees, about bobcats, about so many different things. And we were able to get speakers from, again, further afield, experts in their field, to come and talk. We learned that our takeaway from that was that people like to be guided still, but sometimes it's easier to just sit in your comfy chair, especially during the winter and the colder months, and listen to what we had to say, what the experts had to say about these topics. So we're really excited about that. We're hoping to get back into in-person conservation cocktails on Friday evenings, but we're also going to continue to have a virtual component. We learned that there are a lot of benefits to having some virtual work done. But what I really want to talk about is another event that we did last year. Like Brooke, we have a major event every year, fundraising event, and ours is called Bagpipes and Bonfire. And we held it in September, and we usually get about 1,700 people out on one of our preserves. We light a huge bonfire that's been, of things that have been collected by our land management staff over the course of the year. And bagpipers come, and they play, and families come and eat, and the bagpipers are piping, the fire gets lit, and it's a very wonderful community event. And unlike you, Brooke, with 3.5 weeks, we had 3.5 months to reinvent that. There's that R word, reinvent that event, which was a lot of fun for us, actually. It involved pretty much our whole staff getting involved in getting ideas out there and figuring out what we could do. And what we ended up coming to is that we wanted people to be outdoors, but we wanted to bring what we do to our community. So we took the concept of the pipers and we put them in 30 locations all throughout our community, so that simultaneously on Sunday night, it was on a Saturday night this year, it's usually on a Sunday evening, we had them all play Amazing Grace. So we let everybody in the community know that these were happening in their local parks, or at the local school, or at the corner of a big intersection, and at our preserves. And then all of a sudden at 6:30 in the evening, when the sun was beginning to set in late September, they all simultaneously played Amazing Grace. It was a very moving experience for a lot of people. And we found that we had 30 to 50 to 75 people come out. They were able to socially distance because these places were big enough so they could spread out. And people were really touched by, first of all, that music is very inspiring. it was sort of like people coming out of the woodwork to be part of their community and listen to the pipers play that song. And I think it increased awareness in our community for our organization. Many people, since it is a fundraiser and it carries a price tag to come to the normal Bagpipes and Bonfire, this was free. And people who hadn't been able to enjoy that in the past came out. We were also the beneficiaries of many people moving to our community during COVID, either temporarily or permanently, and not knowing about us. So they learned about us through that particular event. And we thought that was really a lot of fun. Sorry, I don't have photos because I didn't prepare the bagpipes piece of this in time. But we did, our communication staff did a wonderful job pulling together really cute social media posts about people dressed in kilts and getting ready for the event. So every couple of days we had something. We had a Scottish dancer and a bagpiper playing outside one of our sponsors' banks. We had one of our board member go into the bank in normal clothes, into the ATM cubicle, and come out in full bagpipe or full Scottish attire. So we had a lot of fun creating that and creating a buzz for it and awareness. So ultimately, we also had, I will tell you, Brooke extended his to 8 days. We extended ours from 1 evening to 2 evenings. And on the other evening, we offered people the chance to come to our headquarters area, our headquarters preserve, and pick up a Scottish themed dinner. And we had pipers playing there, and it was all decorated. So people could come in, slots and pick up their Scottish themed dinner and go home, and with their families and their people that they felt comfortable with, have a Scottish themed dinner. For some of the larger donors, we offered a piper to come to their home and obviously stand a distance away and play while they were having their dinner. And we found that was very popular too. People really liked that aspect, and we will continue with that aspect again this year. Our city liked the idea so much that they adopted it for our annual tree lighting, Christmas tree lighting in December. They decided they would light trees at all the little parks and schools around town and get people to come out. So we felt that it was a nice model for COVID and a way to make people aware of Lake Forest Open Lands and what we do and our heritage here, but also to get them outside a little bit more. We also have, a vibrant education component to Lake Forest Open Lands, which is obviously funded by Bagpipes and Bonfires and other donors. But we did that we decided not to do that virtually last year because we wanted to get people outside. So we offered lots of opportunities for students to do self-guided things. We created activity guides and activity adventure kits that people could pick up at our organization and go out with their binoculars or magnifying glasses and story map that we provided in these little kits, and kind of wander on their own to learn things. And those turned out to be very popular too. So without visuals, I apologize, but that's really what we did. We were pretty excited about these things. And even after COVID, if there is a time after COVID, please, we hope to continue doing, having some of these elements in our fundraising event.
Thanks, Susie. Thank you so much for sharing all of that and for being here today. I'd like to introduce now Kim Johnson, and Kim is with the Natural Land Institute, and she's going to talk about their family nature adventures. Kim?
Sure, thank you. Let me share my screen. All right. Well, hello, everybody, and thank you to Prairie State Conservation Coalition for inviting me to share information with you today about our virtual Family Nature Adventures program. And I would like to give credit to Brooke and the Conservation Foundation and his staff, because your event really inspired us to think outside the box and start thinking about how we would do our Family Nature Day differently. And we took a lot of your ideas and sort of tweaked them and incorporated them into our event. So thank you for that. And Susie, your events that you talked about sounded really interesting. It's fun to hear all the different ideas and how people are actually, reinventing and reimagining their events for the virtual world that we have now. So for Family Nature Adventures, as you can see from the dates listed, that it was a weeks-long event, and we eventually decided to extend it to Labor Day, which was on September 7th. And I first wanted to start by telling you about the history of this event. It was an annual half-day event on the fourth Saturday in June at our Niagara and Wetland Preserve in Rockton. And we called it Family Nature Day and started it in 2015. Learning stations were positioned around the preserve for people to walk or ride a wagon to, and it was free admission with open house style event where people could visit the learning stations at their own pace. Kids received a passport book to get stamped and earned a junior naturalist badge. Adults also received a map and checklist, and with 6 stations stamped, they could get a gift for, you know, a reward for what they did. Station hosts were NLI Education Committee members and several community partner organizations, which you see listed at the bottom of the postcard on the left. And the event was funded by 2 grantors and several sponsors. When we realized we would have to transition to a virtual event, we decided we needed help to rebrand it and promote it. So we hired a marketing agency to help with creating a new name, graphics, and a promotional plan. The new virtual event used the same concept as the original with nature-themed learning stations, and we asked the past hosts to help us by creating their own video. It was important to us to encourage outside experiences with this event, so we asked the video host to provide a suggested activity to go with the video that could be done in a backyard, a park, or preserve. And also a question, we wanted them to provide a question as a way to know if people were doing the activities. We paid a professional videographer to master the videos for consistency and to add intro and outro branded slides. This is the cover of the postcard that we mailed to our mailing list of over 1,500 people. And the other side had the event information and mailing panel on it. This is a list of some of our goals and key messages for Family Nature Adventures. And the one that says spend time with your kids and grandkids, recognize that we knew we had to talk to adults with children in their lives because they were the ones that would have to engage the kids in the activities, and they were the ones receiving the email, news, and social media messages. Other messages included what you see here, and the premise of the event was watch a video, do the suggested activity, and answer questions. And the videos were based on the learning topics that you see listed at the bottom of the screen. The event can be found, could be, and still can be found at our naturalland.org/family nature adventures on our website. And I'll post the link to it in the chat in a few minutes when I'm done. The second item that you see here was a message that we stressed often. You really could do this from anywhere. Geographic boundaries were limitless. We even had participants from California. And there was no cost or registration needed to get started, but there was a final participation form to fill out online and submit after doing at least 6 activities to receive the Junior Naturalist badge. And then other messages that you see here were also used throughout our marketing campaign. The images on the right were used for our weekly themes. And then these 2 images on the left were also the other. We had 4 themes and 4 weeks throughout the whole program of different themes. The videos were grouped together based on a theme and then announced as now being available over NLI's email newsletters and social media weekly on Wednesday, June 10th through July 1st. We had 13 learning station topics, and I would load 3 topic videos each week and 4 on the 4th week on our website on Tuesday night before we sent out the email newsletter on Wednesday. We also had drawings for prizes that were held after September 11th with 3 chances to win prizes. We did this to provide an additional incentive to watch the videos and do the activities. We also had a downloadable coloring book that is available with this program. We track participants and comments in several ways, including our videos. We estimated that we saw more than 1,100 people viewing our videos. And while the answers to the activity questions were anonymous, we did compile the answers to learn about what participants were doing. And I wanted to share this one funny story with you that came from the Creepy Crawlers activity question, asking them to tell us what they found under a rock or fallen log. And can you imagine, you're looking at little creepy crawlers on the ground and suddenly you notice you're not quite alone. I had to laugh out loud when I read, then we were followed by a couple of raccoons and decided we better leave. The final participation form was a way for us to know who participated, what videos they watched, and who and where to mail the Junior Naturalist badge to. And demographics questions asked what county or state did they live in, age, race, and gender. I was quite surprised when the first two forms submitted were from a pair of siblings in California. Other questions that were asked are listed here, and it gave our organization a way to find out, how this was impacting them and what kinds of things they found interesting. And I enjoyed seeing this answer from one of the parents. It gave us a focused way to engage with the outdoors beyond what we already did on a regular basis. We will likely complete all the activities eventually because we had so much fun. And here's a list of the top challenges. We did have a short timeline to launch, not quite as short as Brooke with 3.5 weeks, but it was still short. One of the biggest challenges was working out the process for getting the videos from host, sending them to the videographer for mastering, and then getting them uploaded to YouTube after they were mastered. And it was very time consuming and just challenging. I learned a lot during that process. One of my biggest disappointments was distributing only 14 Junior Naturalist badges. I really expected more follow through from the parents submitting a final participation form. And we did have several positive outcomes. Creating more awareness of natural surroundings was thrilling to me, especially when I heard stories like the example mentioned here, which was from one of the final participation forums. The mother of the grand prize winner said the soils video really made an impression on them because when they were kayaking, they noticed erosion on the bank of the river. And honestly, the soils video was one of the least videos watched. So this made a really big impression on me. And the photo on the left side is of two siblings getting their Junior Naturalist badges and certificates with their grandparents. And on the right side of the screen is a screenshot of the event as it currently shows on our website. And if you scroll down, that's where you'll find the videos and you can still watch them and do the activities anytime. So thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Kim. Really appreciate it. We're going to hold questions till the end. Once again, if you have any questions, though, you'd like to put in chat, we can mention those at the end as well. Thanks, Kim. Really appreciate it. So now I'd like to introduce Michelle Mason. And Michelle is with the Barrington Area Conservation Trust. And she was instrumental in our tartans for the trust event this year.
Hi, all. Susan and I are co-executive directors at Barrington Area Conservation Trust, and I am going to share pictures because I think you'd rather see the pictures than me. Let's make sure it works.
You got it.
I got it. So the way this event started was kind of interesting. We got a call from a local newspaper. 2020 being such a challenging year, I happen to have some contacts with a magazine that's very much like Town and Country, and they called and they wanted to cover our event. And not really knowing where we were headed, our event's usually the end of August. We went ahead and did this photo shoot in April and assumed we were going to have some sort of live event, and that basically put us into a live event, whether we wanted to be or not. So we got very creative. I also have a good friend who's a cinematographer, and we decided to try to do a hybrid event. Oh, by the way, on the Country Magazine cover, those are 3 of our board members. So I was lucky enough to have very good looking board members to be on the cover. So we decided to do a hybrid event, and along with that came the option to have watch parties. The watch parties were around $50. If you signed up, you got this great basket that Susan and I are a very small shop, so we hand delivered, gave us a chance to get out and see some of our donors. We had watch parties from Switzerland to St. Thomas to Georgia to Florida. People who had run away for COVID, they could log in and see us. It was really well received. We had a raffle during the event that we had our main donor or our biggest donor for the event draw the live raffle ticket. So it was nice that people were logged in. We also had a silent auction, which we've been avoiding over the years, but I wanted, if you were online, to have something to look at, because the 50 people that were live, and we did keep it to 50 people, also looked at the silent auction, but most of our silent auction was dealt with online. Another plus for being online. It didn't raise as much as I thought it would, but we had smaller silent auction items from local businesses, which really gave us a nice, warm feeling. The highlight of our event was Susan gave a tour of Fen. So we were actually at a private estate. He is putting together a conservation easement with us, and we were on his polo field. But about a 5-minute drive from the polo field, if you drive really, really fast with 3 other people that were at the event, you could go tour the fens. So Susan drove people out every 15 minutes, very fast through the fen, and that was a huge highlight. We took a survey afterwards. Everyone's hoping that we'll do that again. I don't know if Susan wants to do it again, but it was fun. So we were outside. Mother Nature was incredibly gracious. We had a terrible day the day before. It was hot. And then the day of was cool and breezy. It was an evening 3-hour event. Usually we have 300 people. Like I said, we had 50, not including only about 4 volunteers. Susan and I and a few board members who stepped in and opened bottles of wine for us. We were very careful with COVID. You can see in this picture, there were tartan masks that were made by a supporter for us, about 100 of them, and everyone got their mask and they were given to them to take home. So it's been kind of fun seeing them around town, people wearing them in Jewel. They were really well made, and that was very sweet. So as you checked in, you got 2 masks. Interestingly, I guess we were a distance far enough apart, people didn't tend to wear them. Granted, each table was whoever you bought tickets with is who you sat with. So we had tables of 2 and we had tables of 8. And that was up to them. We kept it again, it was almost like going to a restaurant. We rented some bigger tents, very small budget. So we did the best we could with what we had, but people seemed comfortable enough not to wear a mask. This is me with our cinematographer. We had 1 hour of the event was live, way out of my comfort zone. It went really well. I got better as I went on. My takeaway from doing this live and having someone follow me around with a camera is go ahead and try it, because by the end of it, some of the information that you come up with to fill time is really good. The other reason I would do it is it's not a production company. It wasn't $25,000. Those were the bids that we were getting. We're not big enough for that. So he was more in the $2,500 range. What was interesting is I went to everyone there, and a lot of them were board members, and asked, who are you and why are you here? And every response was completely different. So when I went back to watch the recording, really, really interesting. And it involved every person who was attending. So we also hired a DJ. He's a local MC. He did a nice job of helping me fill dead air if I couldn't find someone to interview. We also did individual platters of food. It was a charcuterie platter. You can see here they were covered and it was already placed at your table. So that was another COVID, be careful with COVID situation. Food was amazing by a local restaurant named Region, and everybody seemed lots of food, very happy with that. We put the wine on the table, already uncorked, no bartenders, no bars. And I think if we do something like this again, we might do that again. Everyone appreciated that too. The less contact, the better. We had a red, a white, and some water. And people were very comfortable, very happy. We raised our ticket prices to $250 from $85. That was a big risk. We sold out. We made more. Actually, this was our highest grossing event in 20 years. So with 50 people, it's granted it's always the right 50 people who are committed, who come. We ended up making more money. So very small staff, but very committed. And we did have the owner of the property speak. We also had a whiskey tasting that went over very well, and people took turns going up to taste the whiskey. So that was kind of something fun and something different. No idea what we're going to do this year. I know that COVID's not going away. I know that for a fact. And I know that people are still going to be a little leery. We may stay on the small side again and just make it a little nicer. We did do a raffle. The raffle was, we sold the raffle tickets prior to the event in the invitation. We will do that again. And the raffle tickets were $100 to $500, depending on how many tickets you wanted to purchase. So we made some decent money with that. And the prize was donated by a local contractor, and he did $7,500 in native landscaping. The person who won the year before absolutely loved it, and he bought more raffle tickets this year. I guess he wanted to do more work. So all these photos that I'm showing you, they're all online. Oh, one other thing, we did do a grant challenge. Sorry, I didn't mean to leave that off, Susan. We raised money during a live auction, and that did well. We needed to raise new money, so $7,000. We did it at the event, which got us $28,000. So that was also successful and much easier being live. So my takeaway is, if not now, when? If you have an unusual idea, go ahead and try it. People were very forgiving, I guess is the word. We had technical difficulties. We had metal roofs in the area, and they were causing some problems with the live streaming. And I guess, go ahead and try it. Oh, the only other thing I should show is we did actually have a polo exhibition, which was very unusual. It's nice to be in Barrington Hills where you can go to a private polo field. So our donors are amazing people. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or Susan. And again, this photo gallery is on our website. Thanks.
Thanks, Michelle. Really appreciate it. I could say I was there, and if any of you need a Fen Tour amusement ride operator, you can know where to find me. But it was a great event. Really appreciate it. And the great pictures. So I'd like to introduce now Katie Van Sloten. Katie is with Prairie Land Conservancy, and she is going to talk about their weekly Facebook nature videos. Thanks, Katie.
Working on it. Thank you for having me, everyone. I'm really glad to be with y'all today. Let me start sharing this presentation. All right, get this out of the way. I am Kate Van Sloten. I am the program coordinator for Prairie Land Conservancy. It's a little bit about myself. I just graduated from Western with a master's in recreation, parks, and tourism. And I have a lot of roles at PLC, but a lot of it revolves around education and outreach, fundraising, and membership. So my event was a little bit different. This was like a bi-weekly event, and it became an educational outreach called the Nature Brief, which is just a 3 to 5 minute educational video that I post to our Facebook page, our website, YouTube, and to our email list. And when COVID hit, if you were like us, we said, oh my gosh, our staff is too small. We have very low budget. We don't have time. I don't know how to produce videos. So if you felt like this, or if you still feel like this presentation hopefully will encourage you a little bit. I was like, I don't know how to make videos, but I know how to use Canva. And in Canva, I know you can make a video. So if you all have not heard of Canva, you should look it up, canva.com. I know there's probably plenty of you that do use it, but for those of you who don't, please, please, please get yourself Canva. You can use thousands of stock photos, lots of recorded video. They have a huge library of music, and you don't even have to be very good at creating and designing because they have templates for everything. And it only costs $120. And if you're a nonprofit, you can apply to get the pro version for free. So this is what the nature brief looks like. And if you look at it, it kind of looks like a really fancy PowerPoint. But if you actually add a little bit of animation and music, you suddenly have an educational video. Super easy to create. If you can make a PowerPoint, you can make a nature brief. So as you can see, there were a lot of great photos in there, animation and music, and it was just super easy to create through Canva. I have no video experience, but people have absolutely loved the nature brief. So let me tell you some of the benefits. Mostly it helped me stay really relevant during this time, helped me reach new audiences and build better relationships. So we talked about this a little bit yesterday with working that bottom-up angle instead of top-down angle with yesterday's speaker. And Brooke McDonald also mentioned this yesterday, that we have data, we need to use it so that we understand what our base and supporters actually care about. Facebook, YouTube, they gave me tons of free data from the nature brief. And the data they gave me, it showed me, what do people actually care about? That bird video that I just showed a portion of, it's had almost 1,200 views on our YouTube channel. And all this data has shown me that people care about these things on the right. They care about birds, they care about native plants, pollinators. Of course, this is probably not surprising to any of you, but what I did also find out from the data is my base really cares about rare animals and art and meditation in nature. And this art and meditation in nature, I didn't think it was going to resonate with my base, but anytime I do something about this on the nature brief, they just love it and share it all over the place. So when I am doing messaging like appeals and events and education, I am going to follow these topics to lead with. But what that data has also shown me is, unfortunately, my base doesn't really care as much about legislation and green living, which I found shocking. I thought that this would be something that they would care greatly about. And it's not that no one cared about it, it just didn't go over as well. They kind of acted like this chimpanzee on the right or left-hand side of your screen. Doesn't mean I'm not going to talk about these things with my audience, but it's probably not what I'm going to put a major campaign about. Secondly, the nature brief has really helped us reach new audiences. For those of you looking at this, if you're not sure what this is just a snapshot of Facebook analytics of my videos. So this is from March 10th of 2020 to February of 2021. So basically the year of COVID. And all of the nature brief videos are put on this Facebook page. And what we have seen here in this red is that we have gained 231 net followers just from the nature brief alone. That's a 100% increase over last year. And the really exciting thing is, if you see these red check marks, is that it was shared to 32% of those people that viewed it. So they're seeing it because it's being shared. And we're reaching non-followers. 58% of those views came from followers, 42% came from people who hadn't followed us. So the nature brief has been an excellent tool for us to reach new audiences with. It's also helped us build really great relationships. This is a quote I received from an email. A reporter reached out to me. Somehow they saw the bird beak video and they said, hey, I saw at the end that a pair of whooping cranes were seen on your reserve. Can I do a story about it? So I never dreamed the nature brief would have reporters calling me, but reporters have been calling me. And I've had really, really great reactions from donors, from small donors, large donors, VIP donors. If you look at the quotes on this screen, some of these came from conservation easement donors, and other of these came from family members who have donated one of our wildlife preserves. So folks who are what I would consider VIPs are really loving this educational aspect that we are putting out with the Nature Brief. One of my favorites is I just watched this video with my 19-year-old twins. They loved it. You know, when I started this, I'm like, I don't think anybody's going to watch this. I don't know if they're going to like it, but people do like it. And it even resonates across different age categories from 19-year-olds to 80-year-olds. I mean, they're all enjoying it. And this other quote at the bottom, I forwarded the videos to people I know out in the native plant community in LA. Yes, thank you. Please forward my videos to people that already care about native plants and live somewhere other than West Central Illinois. And we have gotten new members from Seattle, Washington, and other parts of the state that probably had never heard of us before. And people are like, well, that's great, Katie. Show me the money. Are these educational videos actually bringing in memberships and donations? And I would say yes. I've gotten new members because of it. But I've also gotten some nice sizable donations. One individual just wrote us a check for $5,000 because he's like, I love what you're doing. I want you to keep doing it, and we want to support it. But I know that it's not always easy to quantify educational outreach. So I would tell you that the Nature Brief has done wonders for helping the PLC brand. Seth Godin, he's a pretty big guy in the marketing world. And what he says is a brand is a set of expectations, memories, stories, and relationships that taken together account for a consumer's decision to choose one product or service over another. And the Nature Brief is definitely doing that. It's helping people hear about stories, about conservation. It's helping us develop relationships, and they're creating memories with their families watching these Nature Briefs together. So hopefully when they want to decide who they want to donate to, the Nature Brief has done a really good job of creating a positive brand image. So if you have any questions, this is my contact information. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Katie. I really appreciate it. If anyone does have questions for any of our presenters, I've seen some in the chat. Please put them in the chat now because we're getting a little short on time. So presenters, if you can also look at the chat to see if there's any questions that might arise in your area. And I'd like to introduce now Jessie from Joe Davies, and she is going to talk about Facebook Live. Jessie.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Jessica Carrier from the Joe Davis Conservation Foundation, and we are located up in the northwestern corner of Illinois. You might hear it called Galena Country. So we're a nonprofit land trust out here that has to adapt very quickly, like all of you, to COVID. So about a year ago, as we were trying to figure out how to adapt, we were thinking, what do we have to offer the community? We live in a pretty tight community, and we have a lot of good partners that, we were all learning about how each partner is being affected differently from COVID, and just thinking about how can we step up. So what we started to do pretty early on was we made these little videos just kind of featuring one specific preserve. Our Valley of Eden Bird Sanctuary was pretty new and relatively undiscovered by a lot of people. So we made a quick little video just kind of inviting folks to go out there, what are the trails like and the ecosystems. And we saw that a lot of people had viewed that video, and we decided that, to continue doing this on a weekly basis, since, a lot of our events, we had to cancel them or get really creative. We basically moved a lot of our events to Facebook Live. So, for example, we did some on just general wildflower walk in the prairie, or how to monitor a bluebird nest box. Or we did frog walk. We have an annual frog walk event that attracts a lot of people. So we did a virtual frog walk. So, and having our Facebook Live events on the same time and same day every week kind of allowed people to kind of grow a habit of, okay, I know every Thursday morning at 10 o'clock to tune in. And we would answer questions live too. There was some back and forth as the audience can type in questions, and then we would just kind of answer them right there. And so it kind of gave us a really good way to, you know, maybe touch base with the people that we haven't seen in a long time because of COVID. So, so it was really kind of a fun experience. It was really, it was one of the few positive things that came out of the whole COVID experience. So we feel pretty good about the way that we've adapted our outreach and education and going online. And our system was pretty similar to the last presenter, Katie, how you had kind of a weekly online program. So this really allowed us also to partner with a lot of other organizations in our area. For example, we went over to the Mississippi River Museum, and we met some of the staff there and heard about, you know, what is it like to be at the River Museum right now? Or we went to Gramercy Park Foundation, where they have preserved Native American burial mounds, and to learn about what are the projects on their horizon. And so we could all kind of get together and kind of amplify each other's voices. So that was kind of nice to see how everybody was able to kind of come together for each other and for the whole community. So there's a lot I could probably say about how the year has been with our outreach programs. We're all excited to kind of get back together in person. And I think this experience has really taught us that we can, you know, we're all well adept at Zoom programs now, and we're going to continue our Facebook Live programs just because it's really drawn in a lot more followers, a lot more memberships, and it's really kind of required us to, on a regular basis, reach out to some community leaders or other organization leaders. So it's been a really good experience for us. If you guys have questions for me later in the Q&A, let me know. I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It looks like we have about 5 minutes. So if anyone has any questions, if you could either put them in chat. It looks like we had someone ask a question about embedding videos in Canva. And thanks, Kate, for addressing that, said we could do that. Any other questions? Raise your hand or unmute yourself and put your video on so I know you're here. We have really some great ideas and we're resilient. It's awesome.
Susan?
Kim, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know that we are planning our Family Nature Adventures as an in-person event at our Nigrin Wetland Preserve this year on June 26th. And we're going to have a videographer there to record the station house as they're doing their activities. And then afterwards, we'll post it on our website, the videos for people to do as a virtual event throughout the summer. And then it's also going to be a bilingual event where we're putting everything, all of our promotion material and our event material such as signs and passports for the kids into English and Spanish. So it will be bilingual. And then we'll also have volunteers at the stations to help with translating the activities into Spanish for our Spanish speaking attendees. And we're going to do a concerted effort to advertising and reaching out to the Hispanic communities in our area.
Great. Thanks, Kim. Anyone else questions? Okay. If no other questions, we're going to go right into our break. We have a 15-minute break. And after that, we'll be reconvening at a little before 1:45, a few minutes before 1:45. So go ahead, grab your coffee, your tea, whatever. We're not having our beer yet or my water bottle. That'll be later today. So we'll hope to see you back in about 15 minutes. Thank you.
Earth, a stunning panorama of life. This is what drew most of us to conservation in the first place. But as the world has become ever more connected and complex, we've come to realize that while conservation is still about saving these animals and these places, it's also about us and our ability to ensure our own survival.
The Nature Conservancy has an extraordinary legacy of protecting land and water at an enormous scale. But today, we realize that we can't protect nature just one place at a time. We have to work at multiple places around the globe to make a profound difference so that both people and nature thrive.
By 2050, global population is expected to grow to more than 9 billion people. The growing needs for food, water, and energy will tax our natural world as never before. At the same time, we face the threats of climate change, major biodiversity loss, and water scarcity. A new kind of conservation is needed.
We're using science to set our priorities, but really a whole new set of science that we haven't used before. We're having to look at economics, agronomy, and hydrology to help us see the whole scope of the challenges that we face and make sure we're doing the most effective, important things.
We believe that we can harness the awesome power of nature and renew our thriving planet.
We are focusing on the things that will have the greatest impact on our world. We're still committed to protecting land and water. We'll continue to protect critical ecosystems, especially ones that won't be protected unless we step up and do it. We're still in that business. We're also now in the business of addressing climate change, feeding the world sustainably, and bringing nature to cities. That's the TNC game plan for the big challenges ahead.
For this spectacular planet and all the life it holds, the clock is ticking. Only by working together can we give people hope. Keep our wildlife wild. Keep our home whole. And ensure the future of a world that sustains us all.
there's a little dialogue bubble shaped icon. You can do that to call it out, but don't worry about it. We'll follow the chat for you.
Okay, that'd be great. All right, so let's get going then, since we don't have a lot of time. I just did want a reminder that Land Trust Alliance staff are here to help you. Here's some of us. I'm sure you know Mary Kay and Laura. Feel free to call or write to any of us at any time. We'll do our best to help you. Okay, so I did want to start, and I thought you might find it interesting, these 6 points about terra firma as you're planning your stewardship work, because possibly you may not be aware of one or two of them. So here they come. As Ryan intimated, it's owned by the insured member land trust. So for 2021, 541 of you folks are the sole owners of terra firma. No one else owns it. Here's one that people don't know a lot. Terra firma insures your preserves too, and your trails, deed restrictions and covenants, as well as conservation easements. So I know the Midwest Land Trust own a lot of land and probably are experiencing trespass and encroachments, and we are going to talk about that later. So just bear in mind, terra firma can help you with your defense and prosecution of preserve problems. It's conservation defense liability insurance, so it only covers your conservation defense portfolio, your easements, everything terra firma covers, preserves, trails. It's not for slip and falls. It's not for the tree falls on your buildings. That's other insurance, which we here at the Alliance, we've learned a lot about insurance in the course of starting and running terra firma, and so we can point you in the right direction. But terra firma is only to help you basically with your stewardship, defense, and enforcement. The safety net, it is not a substitute for having a strong legal defense reserve. There's a $5,000 deductible, for example, $500,000 claim limit, and then there are 33 exclusions from coverage like condemnation. That's a big one. It is organized as a risk retention group under a federal statute. That's what lets terra firma operate in 48 states without having to deal with each of the state regulators. So we can offer this as a national program. And there literally is nothing else like it in the world. It's the only one. And the 541 land trusts insured with terra firma are the owners of it. So just some fast stats, because we've just closed out the terra firma membership confirmation window for 2021. And I'm really excited about some of these stats. Over 9.8 million acres insured with terra firma. That's really exciting. That's over 80% of the easement and owned land acres held by land trusts. As I said, 541 owners, almost 35,000 parcels. And of course, claims come with that. So in the 8 years of terra firma, we're probably over the 1165 at this point. Not all of those are open. Many of those are closed. We have 22 positive court opinions arising out of those. So obviously, almost all of these claims are voluntarily resolved without having to resort to a court process. But terra firma can still help you in those early stages. And then finally, almost $3.5 million paid to support the land trusts and those claims. Before I go on, Ryan, any questions, comments?
No,
from anyone?
No, not yet. And we're seeing your screen and hearing you great.
Great. That's great to hear. Thank you. Okay. So moving on then, we are going to cover these three big topics: lessons learned, national perspectives, and then if we have time, I hope we do, I want to just run through lightly some developments on drafting, mostly from the IRS perspective, but also from cases we've seen both in terra firma and otherwise. Okay, so here we go. Lessons learned first. We're going to tackle these 5 items on the lessons learned topic, and we'll discuss them. I do have a variety of handouts that if anyone wants them, I'm going to mention them as we go along. If anyone wants them, let Ryan know. I can pass them along to Ryan or Carrie or Sandy, and they can distribute them. Okay, so here we go on our 5 topics. First of all, we're going to talk about disputes in court. Be prepared to lose at trial. In fact, in Ohio, you may have heard of the case. We lost it, important case in probate action, where, just to illustrate judicial temperament, the probate court judge said, yeah, I know what your easement says, and yeah, it's clear, and I don't care. We're going to divide the property anyway. So it went on to appeal, where we won a resounding national precedent-setting case in Ohio. It's very great. It cost over $102,000 to do that, but hey, it's a great precedent. There was no cost recovery there either. So good news is, even though many times, surprisingly, you can lose in sort of the frontier, rough and ready justice of trial court, with the terra firma backing, you've got the oomph, provided you've got a strong enough case to get into appeals where they tend to follow the law instead of just reactions, and you can get a better recovery. But you've got to be prepared to do that. And we're going to talk a little bit more about documentation and readiness. So major violation cases are rare. Sometimes things like this no division case that was just sort of trundling along in probate court that no one thought was major explode, and then suddenly you have a severe problem. We, knock on wood, haven't had the classic fully built house on a preserved piece of property where it shouldn't be yet. Some close calls. Most of the structure violations are minor. We've got a chart on that later. The rate of violations is relatively steady for easements. Unfortunately, we are seeing problems with original grantors going up. And we have a chart on that later too, and we've actually broken out the costs associated with resolving disputes with original grantors. So if your land trust is assuming that you will not have problems with your original donors, grantors, you might go back and revisit that. And I assume most of you are now experiencing successor owners in your conservation easement lands, and most of the problems still remain there, but it is an increasing trend. I've got a chart, pie chart, that shows the pie slice for original owners getting bigger. So you might just reevaluate your systems there with your original owners. We're going to talk more about drafting as we go along. Solid drafting and strong stewardship go together, and you can't have one without the other. We have a lot of drafting pointers in the Learning Center. I'm going to mention some. I'm happy to send them to you, but you can go there. There's a special section in the Learning Center on practical pointers, and that's where they all are. Okay, and then preserves have problems too. And I know we're mostly supposed to talk about easements, but I do want to talk about preserves because trespass on preserves is an increasing trend, and it's expensive. So we're going to talk about that right now. So preserves has problems too, and I bet you know that. We have some action steps. This document is also in the Learning Center. It's longer than what I've excerpted here. These are the tools that we've seen to be most effective when you have a trespass or encroachment on. So having a board liaison and full board authority to move forward. If you're staffed, obviously if it's all volunteer, the board's managing it. But taking that step early and first gives you a firm footing. And then immediate proportional steps with clear goals. That's where the board authority comes in. One hopes the board has given you clear goals. And the immediate proportional steps are really important. The land trusts that have let encroachments and trespass just languish, expand, trundle along for 5, 10, 20 years, have many more problems, adverse possession, sometimes being the least of them in these preserves. So know your boundaries, take immediate steps at the first instant of any crossing of boundaries. Use neighbor eyes. I know you can't be everywhere all the time. The neighbors can, they've got your back. Build relationships with them and use them. Proactive mitigation, go out and meet your neighbors to your preserves. I know that takes time, but the land trusts that have told me they've done it have reported a decrease in problems and a new friendly neighbor. You do need local counsel. This area of law is tricky. Sometimes local counsel can advise you on non-court methods to resolve the problem. You need the right attorney who's really going to take a holistic approach with you, though. So be sure to interview your attorneys and get one that's really going to be a partner and a counselor with you on how to problem solve these things. Okay, here comes, you're going to really know the word documentation when I'm done, because I'm going to say it a lot. We've been through trial now more than 22 times, and it is very obvious that the land trusts who have done exceptional documentation, contemporaneous memos to the file, voluminous photos expertly labeled and tied accurately to a map, staff assessments, step by step in the file. Those are the land trusts that win in court and win fully, and many times recover some money because this court is so convinced about what has happened. You need to have a strong damages theory on trespass to get any money back. And that can be tricky if they took trees, although not on preserves because you own it. And then finally, written policies and procedures as part of your documentation. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next one. And I just will commend again to you the pointer in the Learning Center action steps land trusts can take when faced with an encroachment. Okay, assuming there aren't any questions, then we're going to move on to the third item. Drafting. Yes?
We have one question, and I'm not surprised
Okay.
by the author of this one. This is from Dave Holman, and he's asking about kind of a limbo situation where, let's say there's a mistake in the legal description for a conservation easement, and it doesn't describe accurately the conservation area, but there's a encroachment or a violation in the intended conservation area. Would that easement be subject to which legal description prevails if we haven't had a chance to amend the easement correctly?
Great question. First response is go get a lawyer, a trial lawyer who's experienced in real estate. This is where it gets tricky. Usually though, when if you're in a full-fledged dispute, which is different than, the neighbor's like, well, where, I need to put a driveway in, where's the boundary? And you're like, well, here's the survey, but oops, there's a little mistake. Although it's very clear what the owner intended to conserve. If you're in a problem-solving relationship with the other party, that's different than if they're fighting you tooth and nail. You may have to get a new survey. If you can't prove what was intended to be included, or if there's any lack of clarity about exactly where the boundary is, I'm not quite sure what you're picturing was an entire parcel left out inadvertently, even though parcel number was listed. That might be a little easier case. So it's one of those, it depends answers. There's no black and white and you need a lawyer. I hope that was responsive.
I would add, yes, well documented exhibits in your baseline could be.
Yes, that would help.
We had a situation once where there was an abandoned right-of-way that shifted what our original perception of the actual tax parcel line was. And we didn't have a violation issue, but we had to change the legal description of the easement because of that. But it was clearly identified in the baseline.
Yeah, and that's interesting because the abandoned railways are very tricky as far as back title and who really owns them. So that's quite interesting. Yeah, and that's another instance, great example of where documentation can really save you.
Somebody also asked if you could just touch up and go over the strong damages theory again.
Oh, yes, on the prior slide.
Yes.
Yes, so many of the trespass cases terra firma is seeing both, mostly for conservation easements when there's tree removal, sometimes acres and acres of tree removal, is how do you account for damages? Because the statutory stump damage does not replace the trees and does not address the conservation value of trees. Usually we're taking a restoration view, and usually we like to be in there with the conservation easement underlying landowner, because then you don't have usually, although we have one instance, a fight about who really owns the trees, unless it ends up being a fight with the landowner about how much money the land trust gets because you have an ownership interest in the trees. So figuring out, does your state have enough room in the statutes and case law to go for restoration damages or some other kind of conservation value, like unjust enrichment? We use that successfully in Vermont. Or are you going to be stuck with timber trespass value? Now in Connecticut, they have a 3x damages for any kind of trespass, whether it's an easement or land. Now that there seems to be a little discretion in the courts about whether to award that, but at least they've got a statutory, you can get 3x, which is way better than any other state. So that's something to consider if you have a legislature that is responsive to conservation. Is that enough of a flavor? And your attorney should be working with you on what is the viable best damages theory here. And then I just urge you to stand strong on the fact that land trusts have an ownership interest in those trees, because depending on what your easement says about who gets to cut the trees under what circumstances. Okay?
Great, thank you. And Carrie in the chat pointed out the Illinois Tree Cutting Act was just revised here, and
oh, great,
helps give some teeth to these issues.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Carrie. Okay, moving on, or do we have more?
Let's move on.
Okay. All right, so back to more drafting, costs and fees recovery clause. This is the other place where land trusts don't get money back when they should. Again, in the practical pointers in the Learning Center, there's a document on risk management in drafting conservation easements. And what we did there was work with a national team of attorneys to come up with stronger clauses on almost all of the boilerplate clauses. So your no division clause, your costs and fees clause, your enforcement clause, all of those. The thing about costs and fees clause is judges are going to interpret that against you to start with. The American rule is that everybody pays their own, but what we want is for landowners who don't live up to the conservation easement to pay us all the costs and fees associated with whatever went on, plus damages. So you need a clause that's very broad, that's not just enforcement, that includes interpretation of the easement, investigation of the issue, negotiating, mediating, absolutely everything. Too many of these clauses are limited only to reasonable attorney's fees in a litigation setting, and often have various loopholes for the landowners to go through. So you'll get more of your money back if you invest in looking again at your costs and fees clause, and we've helped you out with some sample language. Of course, you have to review with your board and your attorney and see if it fits into your own easement, but we've tried to draft it in a way that shows you how to do it in a broad, comprehensive way. So what we're trying to do with that clause is to make it as impossible for the court to do anything but award the land trust its costs and fees. Rarely do you get all of them, sometimes, but at least to be awarded something instead of just the brush off. Okay, any questions about that? Again, these are all in the practical pointers section in the Learning Center. Okay,
great.
All right, so here's our fourth lesson learned, the division prohibition. So this is the Ohio case I mentioned. We are seeing a number as older generation passes on, the successor generation, the heirs, want to either divvy up the cash by selling the land or divvy up the land because they don't live there anymore or one lives there. I'm sure you've experienced this. So it's often we'll see a partition of tenancy in common, or this is becoming more common, foreclosure of a mortgage encumbering only part of the easement property. So I think you can start to see one of the possible solutions to this, while more time and money is running down title, or at minimum having more inquisitive checklists of items to cover in your annual visit when you're actually speaking directly with the landowner. So you can ask these specific questions, because otherwise you don't find them until it's way too late and it's much more difficult to unravel them. Tax foreclosure is a part of the easement property. That's a real problem. I've sent lots of letters in Vermont when I was with Vermont Land Trust to make sure they knew they couldn't sell off individual parcels. Bankruptcy is a really tough place. And we have lost, terra firma hasn't lost, but land trusts have lost a couple of division issues in bankruptcy court, and we're working on turning that around. And then, of course, the other division problem I know you've encountered is landowners unilaterally adjusting boundaries, whether it's a quarter acre or whatever, they've divided where they shouldn't have, and you now have two easement owners. Long-term leases have only a portion of property, another way to divide. So all of this suggests that you might want to ask lots and lots of polite and diplomatic questions, but still direct questions to surface this, or else run the title. Okay, questions on that? Okay.
I have a question. So when you say run the title, is that part of your annual monitoring, or you put that in?
Yes. And some land trusts that have run into this division problem, a couple, 3 times, have finally thrown their hands up and said, okay, it's just going to be part of our annual monitoring. We're going to run down the title.
Okay.
And if you do, and they were like, okay, the first time was hard because it was a lot of years, but if you do it every year, then it's just a 1-year update. And those land trusts have come back to me after doing this for a couple of years now and saying, it's worth it. It's really worth it. So just something to consider. It's either ask more questions or run the title, or both. I know it costs money and takes time to run the title unless you have online records. Other questions?
We had one more question going back to the fee-owned, our preserved properties, and as far as services terra firma could provide. Can you highlight again the difference between what terra firma provides for the fee properties and what current liability insurance provides for our land trusts?
Sure. So current general liability coverage won't likely cover you if your neighbor comes onto your property and, does whatever, cuts down all the trees, builds a road, builds a pond. That's trees and land are not within the general liability policy. People's bodies and buildings are. So that's one area where terra firma fills a gap in your general liability coverage. And it's the same with the garage over the edge of the line, that kind of thing. Does that answer the question, or was there a part 2 to it?
That is it for now. That was helpful too. So
okay, you bet. Okay, are we moving on now?
Yes.
All right. So here again, documentation is fundamental and critical. So annual monitoring, both for your owned land and your conservation easements, they can look pretty much the same. Report maps, photos. Of course, a lot of us are doing remote monitoring now. That works. The full, complete, and consistent baseline. I can't emphasize enough how critical that is to be consistent with your conservation easement. Inconsistency is just another opportunity for the opposing party to drive a wedge and convince the court that you don't know what you're doing and that the landowner's right, not you. And the other thing that needs to be consistent is internally in the conservation easement. If you have overlay buffers or other areas, it needs to be crystal clear. Those are protections on top of what are the normal restrictions. You know, an internal numbering, all of that is really important when you are in a dispute, because the other side's attorney is going to be picking that apart for every inconsistency and ambiguity to convince the court that the landowner is right and you are wrong. Okay. I don't know if any of you get the network update, but we have a article this month on surviving disputes. And I commend to you the Sonoma Land Trust in California case summary that is also in the Learning Center, because they did an excellent job on documentation. They documented the story of the dispute, the party's response. They documented the massive disturbance extremely well. Thousands, literally, of labeled photographs. Thing they other did for the court that was very important was to explain who the land trust was and why they were important and different than the normal sort of plaintiff you might see in court. They had correspondence and found emails and texts during discovery that showed clear repeated attempts on the part of the land trust to resolve and clear repeated obfuscation and actual lies by the landowner. So that kind of crystal clear documentation really helped the Sonoma Land Trust win their case. And not only did they win the case multiple times, there have been multiple appeals. They've won every single one. They've also, to this point, recovered somewhere close to $700,000 in damages. And now they're on to attorney's fees. And looks like they may successfully recover a very big hunk of the $3 million in attorney's fees spent on that case. So documentation really is critical. Okay, are we moving on, Ryan? Any questions?
Yes, let's move on. No more questions at this point.
Okay. All right, so now we're moving into the national perspective. We're going to overview these five items on trends. I've mentioned a few of them already, so I think they'll be familiar to you. So we're going to do owned land again. This is really important. Types of disputes, and then we're going to talk a bit about challengers, because it seems to make a difference what your challenger demographics are. And we're going to talk about costs. Okay, so here we go. So this is fee land. You can see the fee land claims, of course, are a smaller proportion than the easement claims, but it's growing. And they're right now they're just about proportional in terra firma. For a while there, they were running way ahead of how many fee parcels there actually were insured. And every year the fee land insured parcels are growing, because I think land trusts are experiencing more trespass. Okay, these are types of disputes. And I think that you're going to look at this and go, oh yeah, you know, that was my sense of it. And that's right. One of the things terra firma has shown us is that our anecdotal sense of where the problem areas are, it was accurate. So this is data from real terra firma claims. So structures and improvements, lots of driveways and roads in the improvements category, some fences, it's mostly driveways and roads, and then small nominal structures, well, some a little bigger than nominal. Those are the biggest clump. Then tree cutting and other vegetation cutting is the next big clump. And then look, there's the no division or partition prohibition is the next biggest one. So those are the top three. There are a fair number of boundary disputes. More and more land trusts are getting title insurance, which I do encourage, because it can help with those. And even if there's a survey exception, there are other title issues like names where title insurance can really help you. Okay, moving on. Okay, so here are our challenges. So I've been talking a lot about that light blue piece of the pie there, the original owner. That's a much bigger piece of the pie in 2021 than it was in 2010. Successor owners, the light green, of course, is still the biggest. That's to be expected. And then the third party slice of the pie, that's also grown. So it used to be that successor owners was, 2/3 of the pie, and these other two groups have started taking more of that pie. So I hope that it will inform your policy and procedures and possibly make you rethink where you might emphasize more outreach or relationships, or at least be better prepared for those types of problems, because you do have to handle them a little differently. Okay, here are average costs. This is up to 20. We haven't updated yet for 21. So there's our original owner, about $18,000 per claim. Third parties, well, there are a lot more of them. They weren't as expensive, although we've had some memorable third party trespasses. And then finally, successor owners, which are the most expensive. Successor owners are the ones who are more willing to spend money to say, I'm right, and land trust, you are wrong. Fortunately, we've won almost all of those. Okay, so I think the bottom line on this duration slide is the longer the problem stays around, the worse it is and the more it costs. So that goes back to my point about immediate proportional action on everything. And that doesn't mean you leap into court. It means it's proportional, whatever is proportional to the claim, to the problem. But to leap on it and don't let it sit around, because it's only going to get worse and cost more to resolve. Okay, so before we don't have a lot of time left for drafting, and that's fine. Let's make sure there aren't questions from the slide.
Yes.
Part.
So there's 4 questions.
Okay.
On slide, I think it was 13 or 14, that listed the percentage of parcels covered by terra firma that had claims. Yeah, I think it was the previous. Yeah, that one.
That one?
Nope, 2 more back. It had
back.
Yeah, it had some text on the right side.
The fee parcels?
This one, yep. What percentage of parcels with claim? So 2.8% of all of the insured parcels had claims. Is that what number 3 is saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because there's about 35,000 total, all insured parcels, and about 1165 claims. So, yeah.
Interesting. Next question. Let's say that the landowner is not the property manager or renter on the property.
Yeah.
You have an issue. Who do you deal with? Do you go to the named parties in the grant of conservation right? Or do you just, what's your first communication?
Yeah. So two-part answer to that. It depends on the nature of the problem, how serious, how severe, etc. You know, if it's a minor little thing, I think the property manager. If it's something that's concerning that the manager is non-responsive, or that is a moderate to serious violation, I would have on the list to discuss with your board and attorney everyone, because the legal responsibility is with the actual owners, even though they aren't there. And what often happens, we see in the dynamic, is that the property manager may not tell the owners, or may give a one-sided report to the owners and make it worse. So, and especially in your follow-up written documentation, copying the landowners would probably be advisable. And the one sensitive issue is the property manager's status with his employers and the relationship with them to, make the messages diplomatic while as crystal clear that there is a problem as possible. So it's a difficult situation, and I have been there. But I found that really the only way especially on the more serious problems, to get it resolved is at the beginning, to copy everyone on all emails, all texts, all paper correspondence.
That makes sense. I've got two more questions. What are the top 3 types of encroachments that you're most commonly seeing with third-party trespassing?
Yeah, good question. And it's interesting, it kind of tracks this slide. So structures, little structures, people build a lot of buildings, home additions, garage additions, little garden sheds, fences, whatever, over the line, even marked lines. Don't ask me why. Driveways, huge issue. So if you see someone putting in a driveway and you don't know where the boundary is on your easement or preserve, I might urge to just introduce yourself to the neighbor, who you are, why you're there, ask if they've had the property surveyed, do they know where the boundary is, can they work with you, that kind of thing. It's so expensive to put those in, and once they're in, it's a nightmare to get them moved off of your property. So catching those and stopping it if there's not clarity about the boundary is important. Topography changes, vegetation cutting, that's huge. That's a huge trespass item. And ponds, we see believe it or not, a fair number of ponds. Art installations, that kind of stuff. Trails, another big one. Does anybody have a other example that they see a lot? Maybe I covered the big ones.
Okay, and then final question. So a successor landowner that is now an easement's owned by, or I guess it could be a fee property owned by a governmental organization. Do you have any examples or instances where that municipal or government type organization has attempted to dissolve a conservation easement?
Yes, and you're saying that the successor owner is a government or other nonprofit entity? Oh, yes, we have. And sadly, those attempts at termination and extinguishment are increasing. I mean, it's not a huge problem yet, but it's a troubling upward, slow climb. But yes, we are seeing those attempts and have had to stop them. And we've seen them both for political reasons, just like I don't like conservation easements kind of political reasons, and development, especially development to serve the aging population. Although schools still remain a big reason to try to extinguish easements.
Final follow-up question, going back to the tenant versus property owner situation. Can you think of an example where it would not be okay to just go ahead and reach out to both parties to head off issues, either, announcing, monitoring, or actually discussing potential issues?
I like that idea of also including them in the announcement that you're coming to visit. That's good. So again, this is where you'd want attorney advice, and you may want to think about actually writing this in your procedures. Some things I can think of off the top of my head where I'd really want to sit down with an attorney and talk about this. But all of the actual landowners have some kind of impairment. They're very, very old. They're in a nursing home. Maybe they have some illness that prevents full comprehension. Certainly COVID is, that doesn't prevent emails, but it does prevent that in-person thing, especially with people at risk. Children, there could be situations where children are the beneficiaries of trust and there are no adults except the trustees. I think then you would be talking to the trustees and not the beneficiaries. If there's some, I can't imagine this happening, but since you've asked for examples, there's some kind of injunction or prohibition, or you've signed some kind of document that says you won't talk to the owners, then you don't talk to the owners if you're under some kind of binding legal I hope that doesn't happen to you, but
Right.
that would be another one. So talk to your attorney if you run into anything where you're going, ooh, I wonder what we should do. You go talk to your attorney. And then document your decision, because if there's trouble afterwards, what you want in the file is the meeting with the attorney and a letter from the attorney telling you exactly what to do, and then your follow-up documentation that you did exactly what the attorney told you to do. Right?
Right. Okay, that's it for the questions for now, and we have just about 20 minutes left.
Okay, all right. Oh, good. So we can do drafting if everyone's up for that. So a sort of risk balancing perspective. Okay, so here we go. So standing back a little bit, what land trusts care about, I think, are conservation goals and values, right? Heavy impact uses like commercial, where there's a lot of motor vehicle traffic or a lot of foot traffic or lots of heavy use structures. Temporary versus permanent, a tent out in the field for the summer months is way different than a 1,000 square foot recreational cabin in the woods, right? And then implied uses. So your conservation easement permits agriculture, but that's all you say. And they decide they're going to run a bed and breakfast that's ecologically based. They're going to have a vineyard with wine tastings and sell wine paraphernalia. They're going to have luau's and music festivals to celebrate the land. You see where I'm going here. Understanding what comes with those undefined terms in your easement is really important. Okay, then, since the IRS has gotten into the mix here on easement drafting, we wish they wouldn't, but they have. The IRS cares about that, the perception that the conservation easement might favor development rather than first protecting the conservation values. So that's the whole point of making it crystal clear in your easement that this is all about protecting conservation values. And yeah, there's some ancillary development, but it doesn't affect conservation. And now, after some of the cases we've had, you're going to need to document that it doesn't adversely impact conservation values in your baseline documentation report. You also want to avoid any perception of self-dealing on the landowner's part at the expense of taxpayers, where they're trying to get a deduction without really giving away anything of value in the conservation easement. Okay, so here's some lessons learned. It says these are tax cases. So really, they only apply to donation easements, but some of these could be useful to you in your purchase easements. And remember, a bargain sale still counts as a donated easement. Okay, so avoid a specific boundary adjustment clause. That doesn't mean you can't adjust the boundary, but the specific clause does set off IRS audit flags if they decide to audit your landowner. Don't permit building area relocations or land substitutions in the conservation easement. That doesn't mean that you can't deal with problems after the fact through stewardship. But you're going to need a good amendment clause to do it. Avoid inconsistent uses or excessive permitted structures and uses. Now, the IRS is starting to pick at us about what is an inconsistent use. They have attempted to say that forestry is an inconsistent use. So expect more there. And this is where, again, your documentation report can be a very useful tool where you just drive home the point that whatever reserved rights, permitted rights, house rights, agricultural forestry rights you've allowed are consistent with and support the stated conservation values. Now, it's going to take a little more work. And you're going to need some outside documentation of that, but it'll really help long-term as well as help your landowner. So as I suggested, any problems that we used to just give ourselves flex and clauses, now you have to deal with problems and errors through stewardship administration. The IRS likes to see protection of vast intact blocks of undeveloped land. Now, that doesn't mean that we stop doing our job, because so many of our ag and forestry easements require certain structures that are dispersed. So you just have to take more care in limiting them and being clear in your documentation that they support conservation. And then as far as the approval standard, combining conservation purposes and the holder's sole discretion goes a long way with the IRS. As far as approval standards, when the landowner has to ask you for approval, many land trusts still have a clause that says, hey, if you don't hear back from us in X days, it's deemed approved. You can't do that anymore in a donated easement. There are cases now held on appeal. Any approval standard has to be, hey, if you don't hear from us in X days, then it's deemed denied, but you can sure submit it again. And all these cases are in the Learning Center. We also have practical pointers on all of these points, again, in the Learning Center in the practical pointers section. I'd be happy to send them to you if you want. So again, full documentation is critical. And I know I've said the word documentation on every one of these points, but it really does save the day. Okay. Oh, should I stop there, Brian? Are there any questions?
No. We can
okay, great. Maybe you've heard this enough already. I think this slide has surprised people. Non-residential improvements. These are some of the things you might think about defining. What's agriculture? Is it luau's and music festivals if they're held on a farm? What's recreation? Do you need to say in a recreation's permitted clause that they can't charge a fee for it? They can't build structures? You might want to do that if those are use issues, and they usually are load, scope, and scale issues where you do want to constrict it. Using the word commercial sometimes helps, sometimes doesn't. A case in Maine where a successor owner bought a farm, built dormitories, and started running a ecological college, charging fees, was held to be non-commercial, not commercial, because it was educational. So using the word non-commercial, while I still find that helpful, is not enough. And many land trusts are also trying to say, this is the damage on the land that we want to prevent. So addressing things like no changes in topography, no structures, no pavement, the impermissible services. I think that in combination could be more helpful. Driveways, roads, fences, parking, those are all improvements, not structures. So that's important to remember. Improvements is the biggest category. So if you're looking at a Venn diagram, the big circle is improvements. The next circle in is buildings, and then tiny circle, structures. Energy and utilities, that's a big sleeper, and those cause a lot of problems. So septic systems, driveways, fiber optic cables, telephone, sewer, water, you name it. All those energy and utilities things are linear infrastructure, can be very disruptive, and people forget to restrict those. Was there a question, Ryan?
I was just going to comment. I remember from Raleigh 2 years ago, the issue of a cell phone tower hidden inside of a silo. Silo.
Yep. And we actually did that in Vermont, and it we approved it. Vermont Land Trust did approve that after a lot of research and tax opinions and blah, blah, blah. And we felt it was way better sticking them in silos than up on the ridge lines. So we permitted that and permitted the landowner to take the lease money. And the Vermont Land Trust easement had a clause in it that was basically saying, hey, if something new in technology happens, the land trust gets to decide if it's consistent with the conservation values. And no one had heard of cell towers when they hit, so we used that clause to permit them. So that, again, that was a conservation value interpretation. after a full-fledged investigation involving multiple attorneys and legal opinions. So, and some land trusts might handle that differently, but yeah, it's a great example. So I think you're getting the picture here about how to think about improvements, what's a building, what's a structure. Because one thing I've seen in easements is people are a little haphazard about their language. So this is, again, drafting. If you mean the big circle, you say improvements. But if you say structures or buildings, then you may not be catching a lot of these improvements that I've listed here. And the court's going to rule against you if the issue is fiber optic cable and your easement says no buildings, right? Okay, moving on. So definitions, it's tricky. It's tricky. You don't want a 100-page easement and you don't want a 50-page glossary with definitions. So you really need to find a balance, or your lawyer does, working with stewardship, so you can monitor it. Find a balance that defines your really important terms. Agriculture, what do you mean by improvements? What do you mean maybe by non-commercial? But you don't want to panic your landowners, and you definitely want to keep it simple for stewardship so you can actually monitor it without going inside of buildings, getting fancy equipment, driving yourself crazy. You want to define generally accepted meanings like recreation. Consider and understand your local zoning code, but we don't recommend that you rely on those definitions, and including your state law definitions, because those are out of your control, changed and interpreted by other people who are not focused on conservation, okay? And failing to do that can have serious adverse consequences. So for example, going back to our division case studies, a different land trust had an old clause that prohibited subdivisions, and that's all it said. They lost in court because the court used the zoning code to define the word subdivision, and the land conserved was already 4 separate parcels that had been conserved as a group. The easement did not say this group of parcels must stay together as one, and the court said, there's been no subdivision. These were already separate parcels. They sold off one of the already separate parcels that you had not restricted. Go away. You lose. So just a shocking example of where drafting really needs to be crystal clear. And again, the practical pointer on risk management and drafting has a clause that is broad for your consideration.
So Leslie, we have a question related to that.
Yep.
With drafting restrictions, would it make sense to just have a blanket restriction on everything that's not listed as permitted?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because I see too many conservation easements that have the reverse as a default, which is, I think, highly problematic. And I wish land trusts and attorneys would stop doing it. And the ones I don't like are the reverse, where it says, anything we haven't restricted in this easement is reserved to the landowner. And when I wrote easements for the Vermont Land Trust, I did the reverse. And I said, the landowner has the right set forth in here, and anything else is reserved to the land trust to decide based on the conservation values, if it's consistent with the values. And if it is, you can prove it. If not, not. So yes, I hope that was the question. Did I answer the question?
Yes, and then one more. This is a broader one, but it really is a great question that interests me. And I think it's looking at, kind of as we look back towards yesterday and think about stakeholder engagement, and are there any trends that Terra Firma is aware of that have identified some differences between, as far as challenges go, between publicly funded easements versus privately funded easements or donated easements? And I think this would be an interesting thing to pick up from where the Madison research on easement violations and stewardship left off. Have you any trends like that as far as?
Not that I'm aware of, and I have to say we don't ask when people fill out their terra firma applications for them to indicate if it's donated or purchased, and if purchased, who funded it. We just didn't want to make people work that hard. But I usually find out in the course at least of the covered claims, because we do get the entire file. So without having done specific research, my assessment is no difference.
Interesting.
Now, where we do see differences is in the type of the land base. So agricultural conservation has more problems. Surprisingly, small residential parcels with large, expensive homes have more problems. Conservation in wealthy resort communities, lots of problems. Those are the big ones that occur to me. We've had a recent spike in very severe, like hundreds and hundreds of trees taken, both by landowners, original landowners, and trespassers, both on conservation easements and preserves. One notable one, new neighbor, wealthy neighbor, was landscaping, saw the land trust preserve, ordered his contractor to go onto the preserve, dug up over 500 pine saplings, burlapped them, and planted them on his property. And they had pictures. They caught him in the act. So that is an upward trend line.
So we have about 3 minutes left.
Okay.
And we're all caught up on questions.
Okay, good. So I just want to highlight one item on this slide, which is siting, scope, scale. Those are some of the critical questions. And then, are you including or excluding building areas? And what's the improvement, structure, use? What's it associated with? And then number 5, I just have to emphasize, because I came out of stewardship, that you want to control these things in a way that is appropriate to the stewardship effort. Is the conservation payoff worth the stewardship cost? So drafters have got to be talking to the stewardship folks, and you stewardship folks have got to be feeding back things to your easement drafters that, what works and what doesn't, so that you can get more sensible conservation easement drafting. This is just a fast case summary. And these are not terra firma cases. We've also, in the Learning Center, is a compilation of conservation case law summaries. There are over 653 now. So I did a fast tally out of those cases. There was a total of about 17 losses. 3 of them were big losses. The top 2 were ag structures, just to emphasize my point. Minor structure cases, road cases, vegetation division. Those are the 2 division cases I mentioned with unhappy results. Finally, as I think I mentioned before, judicial subjectivity, if you're in court, plays a big role, both positive and negative. So all you have to look at to compare are in Connecticut, the Lyme Land Conservation Trust won a great victory at all levels of the state courts on an older easement that could have been clearer, but they won because I think it was Connecticut. And in Virginia, even a newer easement, well drafted again, could have been better, won at trial court, lost twice in the Virginia Supreme Court. And it was clearly about the judicial perception of how you value and interpret conservation easements. So my takeaway on that is you need to draft so that you limit their latitude for subjectivity. And if they still indulge in it, then you have a fabulous, we hope, trial record that involves lots of documentation so that you win on appeal. I think we're out of time. That's it. Thank you all very much. And if there are more questions, I'm happy to stay on.
Thank you, Leslie. And we will have a copy of your slides on our website that people will be able to download, because that was a ton of fantastic information. I fully support everybody checking out the Learning Center as well as the Terra Firma risk management courses throughout the year. They've been very helpful for me personally. And thanks again, Leslie. That was wonderful.
Great. You're very welcome. It was my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Folks, if there's any remaining questions, feel free to send them to us. We'll get them to Leslie and we can even share her email address.
And that's actually on the second slide.
Perfect.
Yep. Great.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. So next up, we have my colleague, Susie Hoffman. Joined Lake Forest Open Lands in June of 2009. Wow. It's been a while. As the director of the Center for Conservation Leadership. She was previously the director of Northwestern University's Center for Talent Development and curriculum coordinator for Lake Forest District 67. A Wisconsin native, she spent many years exploring the Northwoods and sailing Lake Michigan. Susie is an adjunct professor at Lake Forest College, and she has a BA in classics from Skidmore, as well as an MBA from New York University. Welcome, Susie.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me. And this time for everybody who is on the call, the roundtable, I do have some pictures. So I am going to start by sharing my screen. I'm really excited to be talking to you today, and it couldn't be a more different discussion than the one we just finished. But I think that it will be, it's interesting to listen to this story. So as Ryan said, I work with Lake Forest Open Lands Center for Conservation Leadership. I hope that there'll be some time for questions at the end, but if you have questions during the presentation, please put them in the chat box and we'll try to get to those. So 12 years ago, we started the Center for Conservation Leadership, or CCL, with the purpose of getting high school students from diverse communities and backgrounds involved in conservation. While we're a local land trust at Lake Forest Open Lands, our mission states that we provide a meaningful and lasting connection to nature for all. Incorporated in that statement is the belief that we will create opportunities for all individuals to feel welcomed, safe, valued, and empowered to participate fully in the outdoors. We also recognize that all this land we've worked so hard to preserve and restore would mean nothing if we didn't involve the next generation of young people from different backgrounds and ethnicities, and include them in this outdoor experience and give them access to the land we've preserved. Our future depends on this. So we designed a program some 12 years ago that would go beyond a one and done and take the students through a stepladder of experiences that could last throughout their high school years, guide them in their choices of higher education and professions, and help conservation become a lifelong interest for them. We reached out to students not only in our community, but those from our surrounding towns and schools in Lake County, brought them together, took them to northern Wisconsin on a 3-week trip to immerse them in the beauty of Wisconsin forests, lakes, and waterways, and then the magic began. We all know that connection to nature is positively linked to higher levels of happiness as it sparks sustainable behaviors, and these behaviors result in greater personal satisfaction. Results from countless studies, as I'm sure you all know, show that children who are very connected to nature tend to be healthier, more altruistic, and to actively care for the environment. In addition to these quality of life measurements, time in nature has also proven to show significant improvements in physical and mental health. The Wall Street Journal recently reported that something as short as a 45-minute walk in nature can make a world of difference to mood, creativity, and the ability to use your working memory. CCL is very personal to the students in the program, as well as to the people who work with it on all levels. And so there's several stories that I would like to punctuate this talk with. And this story, this picture is a story of Alex Nava. At this moment in time, he was a freshman, just having finished his freshman year at Round Lake High School. And this was his first experience in the outdoors. Never really had the opportunity to do something like that. Alex joined our program, and for the next 3 years really became impassioned about improving the schoolyard at Round Lake High School, and every occasion he possibly could, he took to clean that up with the help of his schoolmates. 3 years later, when he was ready to matriculate at Northern Illinois University, Alex gave me a call and said, "Hey, I'd like to come out and say goodbye." So he came over to Lake Forest Open Lands and was positively skipping around the preserve with me trying to keep up with him. And he said, I just wanted to come and thank you for this opportunity. My life would have been a different place, and this is where I have been the most happy in my life. So it's very meaningful for these students, and we'll keep telling a few of those stories. And if a city doesn't have enough green space for the amount of people who live there, as is the case with some of our neighboring communities, there's a public health issue, says Associate Professor Mark Berman, a leading expert at the University of Chicago in how environmental factors affect the brain and behavior. His research has found that nature is not an amenity, it's a necessity. We really need to take it seriously. This slide from the Children in Nature Network illustrates that exposure to nature can also enhance academic performance, motivate the students to concentrate and improve behavior. While this was not one of our original goals, we've seen it play out in so many ways. Students who are not college bound became interested in this possibility. A few years ago, for a couple of years, we took students to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology on a field trip. And one of the students started walking with me and said, hey, you know, before a CCL, my goal was to be a hairdresser. But now that I've gone through CCL and I've learned what I've learned, and I see places like Cornell and understand that I can study environmental studies, science in school, I can be a veterinarian, I can study wildlife, I'm planning to go to college to do that. So it actually does change people's lives and perspectives, perspectives that they might not have known they had before. So some 12 years ago, again, we knew that children, especially teens, needed to connect with nature for their physical, mental, and cognitive health. Their future depended on it also. So our question became, how do we connect students of color from underserved communities to the land? How do we help these students not only gain access to these restorative natural places, but how to get them to belong to nature and understand that the natural world belongs to them? There are many things to consider, and some of these things were really quite challenging. Recruiting students from different communities and different neighborhoods requires building trust and partnerships. Living and working outside is valued, but not necessarily what immigrant parents want for their children. Teens from all communities and backgrounds have exceptionally full schedules. And as we all know, the use of screen time is skyrocketing, even before COVID. In 2019, according to a Pew Research study, half of teens and young adults said they were online almost constantly. In fact, COVID has created a little bit of a backlash about this because we have all teens and adults become Zoom weary. And then, of course, paying for programs is not possible for many families, and free programs are often distrusted. Because of these and a myriad of other reasons, including safety and accessibility, all students today are less involved in the environment than at any other time in history. Yet environmental issues and climate change are the two biggest concerns that teens have today. These problems can seem overwhelming to teens. So it's really important to involve them in a positive way to empower them and get them involved in ways that they can manage. So we began to create a program that would make the nature exposure and learning experiential and place-based. We wanted to level that playing field to provide supplies that were necessary for the students to undertake a 3-week trip and to require no fancy gear, none of this full Patagonia stuff. We wanted to take students to places without the distractions of their school friends, their family, and others. We wanted to reduce or remove those financial barriers and eliminate transportation concerns, to provide opportunities to expand their world and see that people and conservation issues are similar in many places, to interact with peers from different backgrounds, to create a collaborative, safe environment that incorporates inquiry and values differing viewpoints and encourages a culture of inclusivity, and to give students the opportunities to work with adults who care about their perspective and provide them with the opportunity to lead. CCL is a bit of an umbrella. It's a multi-year commitment that students can come in and out of as they see fit, but it generally includes a year-long introductory program in the short term, internships and additional trips to broaden horizons in the medium term, and a resource and placement program to help students identify educational and professional development opportunities beyond CCL in the long term. Throughout CCL, the focus is high touch. We commit to the students fully, and we expect them to commit to us fully as well. Laura Rios, who is the director of Waukegan to College, an organization in Waukegan that helps students find summer, supports them academically throughout their high school careers and helps them get into college, was speaking to her board and parents a couple of weeks ago and giving them, giving them a menu of things that the students could do during the summer. And she was talking about the CCL program and said that the students that participate in CCL become their best students. They understand commitment and responsibility, all the leadership skills that are necessary to succeed in high school. And they have the most opportunities when applying for colleges. So this high touch and one-on-one interaction is core to the CCL program. We also deal with small groups. We only really work with 12 to 16 students per summer. We don't have the capacity for much more and find that small group size allows us to stay true to our high touch philosophy. We provide continuous experiential learning, which includes exposure to professionals and to careers. And we like to encourage shared experiences with peers and adults. And of course, lots of time outdoors. If 45 minutes can make a marked difference in mental health, think what 3 weeks of sustained time in the beautiful Northwoods of Wisconsin can do for you. So CCL nurtures curiosity, creativity, and grit. These are the important non-cognitive skills that are vital in developing character. And it exposes them to social balance issues that they are increasingly aware of as they approach adulthood. But in order to attract teens, we wanted to incorporate all of this and design something engaging and active and fun. So CCL's introductory program begins with a trip to northern Wisconsin. As Baba Diem, this is my favorite quote, the Senegalese forestry engineer famously wrote, "In the end, we will conserve only what we love will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught." In order to really connect with the natural world, teens, especially with those with no previous exposure or knowledge, need to understand it so that they can develop a passion for it. They need to become immersed in it with no distractions from their everyday lives. The people with whom we work in the Northwoods teach the students in ways that the students can understand, and we watch as they come to love nature. On a practical basis, this trip also removes transportation issues and gets them away from home. Important parts of teen development happen when they experience living away from their homes, even for a short time. It levels the playing field as all students, even those with some outdoor experience, have something to learn from this experience. The students work and play alongside professors, naturalists, aquatic biologists, and other conservation professionals who share their knowledge with the teens while hiking, canoeing, backpacking. There's no better way to learn the geologic landscape than to rock climb with Mike Porter, a retired Exxon geologist who climbs alongside the students while giving them the lay of the land, so to speak. In short, the learning creeps up on them. As one student said, science first, but gently. And we also know that not all students are interested in the science entry to the natural world. Some come to it in different portals. So we take the students canoeing with poets and with authors. We visit the studios of artists who are working with ephemeral materials and using natural elements in their work. We learn cultural history from time spent with tribal elders. And while there, we stay in lodges, shelters, and camp, gaining environmental literacy and making connections with the birds, the bears, and the bogs, the woods, the wetlands, and the wolves, and of course, with each other. The trip offers the students the opportunity to get involved in something other than themselves, to get away from screens, the media, and the consuming concerns of their expanding and ever-adulting world. They gain team building, leadership, and naturalist skills, in addition to understanding the connections between themselves and the natural world. They bond with others outside their circle of friends and family and create a family of their own as they engage in the calming rhythms of nature. These numerous social interactions with peers and adults pose challenges to grow from. Young adults get better and better at navigating community life on such a trip, where common tasks must be done, and there's no escape. A student can't just go off on his or her own. Each is required to work together and figure it all out as a community. Each person's well-being depends on this. Teens are incredibly capable and supportive of one another, Every new situation when living in nature and in a community challenges them to grow in meaningful ways. And our students see beautiful natural things when they're sites when they're on these trips. They see eagles and osprey and old growth forests. They hike through bogs and under waterfalls and up mountains. In such ways, nature supports these students and inspires them. Such peaceful moments in the natural surroundings build that deep love for our environment and a timeless concern for it. This will help shape how young people approach life when they become adults. Through this time in nature, the students learn how to love the peace and healing it provides, to celebrate the challenges it presents and that they can overcome, and to feel that sense of belonging to something that is much bigger than they are. As Jonathan said, while watching the water, being in nature, being in CCL makes me feel calm and have an inner peace that I haven't really felt with nature before. I'm pushing myself and challenging myself to do things I never thought were possible for me to accomplish. So the natural world becomes their home. They come home from this trip as change agents with a passion to make a difference in their communities. We arrange field trips, work days, guest guides, and speakers for them to help them reinforce the learning, the things that they've learned on this trip. But the most important work for each student lies ahead as each undertakes a stewardship or action project that highlights their experience and improves their community. The students work collaboratively to identify issues that they want to tackle. They find solutions to environmental concerns that impact their homes, and through this take the learning home and affect a change in their own community. This project that they develop works on their leadership skills and allows them to become advocates for environmental improvements. And through their work, they involve community members, schoolmates, family, friends, and touch many people. People often say, gee, you only work with 12 to 16 students a year. How can you really be making a difference? But really through these stewardship projects, the students touch close to 1,000 students a summer. In fact, and they expand beyond their world. One of my favorite stories is the story of Gabby, one of our students, and her dad, Gabe. And Gabe would come out to every work day that we had and work alongside his daughter. And finally, after several of these, he came up to me and he said, you know, I used to be overweight and stressed. I have 5 daughters and a wife, and I eat too much during the day, and I smoke cigarettes, and I really never get outside. But I wanted to come out and see what Gabby is doing. So I joined her on these work days. And since then, and also expanded them beyond our organized work days. Since then, I've lost 25 pounds. I eat much less. I've stopped smoking, and my stress levels are way down. So CCL, we found, not only helps the students, but it helps the families as well. The students have done so many different projects over the years. They've cleared buckthorn and other invasive plants. They've evaluated, measured water and erosion, collected, processed, and planted seeds. They've lobbied local government officials for clean water and air. They've read nature stories to young children at libraries and shelters. They've developed apps for hiking and outdoor access. They have restored habitat and built habitat for birds, bats, and bees. They've removed litter. They've cleaned bike paths and parks, created recycling and composting stations at their schools and at their faith-based centers, and taught others to repurpose cast-offs so they don't end up in landfills. There have been 175 kids in this program, and each project has been unique. Overall, they have raised awareness in their communities about the importance of natural spaces and about caring for them. And as Daisy said, the stewardship project was my favorite part of CCL. It was the connection from the world I had just discovered to my home. I knew I could make a difference. I asked the kids after the end of the program and say, well, what was the most important thing to you? The trip to Wisconsin or your stewardship work? And without fail, they all say the stewardship work. So it really does create in them a feeling of being able to make a positive difference. And that's really important in this day and age when students are overwhelmed by the climate change issues. To help guide them in these projects, we pair each student with an adult mentor. These are volunteers that come from a lot of different places. They're businessmen, lawyers, educators, engineers, architects, government people, other conservation organizations, but they all have an underlying interest in working with young people. And at the end of this, We have a graduation-like ceremony after the students have worked on this for about a year. And they present their projects to about 100 people who come to listen to them. You can see their confidence and self-esteem grow as they field questions from an interested and enthusiastic audience. And this ceremony, they receive a certificate that recognizes their achievement. And this ceremony concludes the CCL introductory program. But to keep the connections to nature right in front of the students and to keep conservation as one of their interests, it's important to provide an initial employment program to help link the program participants to nature-based internships and jobs. So following the year-long introductory experience, we provide a high school stewardship program here at Lake Forest Open Lands for those interested students to apply skills and learning in an internship, to develop that work ethic and to provide them with a real-life outdoor work experience. While Lake Forest Open Lands provides these internships, we also work with we also try to identify other opportunities for students to work in environmentally focused jobs. High school internships in the environment can really be hard to come by, as many of them are targeted to college students. But CCL has developed a bit of a reputation in our area, and other organizations with summer positions to offer look to the CCL program as the students are well-trained, interested, and eager to contribute. We also provide continuing education and exposure to careers in conservation by providing them opportunities to debate. We have an annual environmental justice debate that's facilitated by environmental lawyers, and this delves deeply into current environmental topics. Students are asked to present one side or the other, not always a side that they agree with, but in this way it opens their minds a little bit and gets them really thinking. We give the students opportunities to ask questions, to find their voice, and to share their knowledge and experience in front of other crowds or other groups. And we provide service learning trips to different places to see conservation at work in other areas. We've taken the students on trips to Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Parks. We've taken them sailing on Lake Michigan on a schooner. We've taken them to southern Louisiana to learn about the other end of our watershed. We've taken them to the coast of South Carolina, where they learn about the saltwater coastal zones as opposed to our freshwater coastal zones here on Lake Michigan. These trips are not just for sightseeing. The students actually get involved in work days and local stewardship during them. One of my favorite stories is on a trip to South Carolina. In prep for this trip, the students work with us in the summer, and they do some restoration and get to know what invasive plants are all about. And they spent the summer removing buckthorn and teasel and reed canary grass. We get to South Carolina and we're driving to our first appointment, and the kids are looking out the window of the van and saying, "Oh, wow, this must be paradise. There are no invasive plants here in South Carolina. What a great spot." So of course we get to the first place, which was actually a conservation easement. And the guide says, well, the first thing we're going to do today is we're going to clear our most heinous invasive plant, the Chinese tallow, out of our woods. And of course, after a little bit of a groan, the students grabbed their tools and headed off into the woods, as the guide said. But beware of the copperheads. We've never seen 12 kids fly out of the woods so fast back onto the path. But I'm happy to report that no copperheads were spotted that day in the Chinese tallow. We eradicated Chinese tallow in that little area. So the kids are making these connections all the time, and that's a lot of fun to see their eyes open. By the time the students participate in these trips, however, they have climbed that stepladder of experiences that I mentioned before, and are able to make connections between ecosystems and places and to understand relationships in the environment. Many also continue to show up at work days to further their stewardship work long after they participated in CCL's introductory program. So this slide has Eddie and Noemi. They both graduated from Waukegan High School last year. And they usually come to CCL after their freshman year. And then they stay with us throughout their high school career. So Eddie, after CCL, really became interested in clean energy in his community. And he's a really shy guy, but he found his voice, his passion and his voice through this, and started advocating for clean energy in Waukegan. He made several trips to Springfield to present, and he's really made a difference. He will continue to work on that throughout his college years. He really wants to improve his community. Noemi, on the other hand, has really always been interested in animals. She's worked with us every summer and participated in restoration, but animals are really her thing. So we were really happy to help her last summer get a position at the Wildlife Discovery Center where she could get some hands-on experience with them before she left for Northwestern University to study wildlife biology. Leslie Vargas, a student from Round Lake, also went through the CCL program and did a lot of restoration with us over the years. When she got to the University of the South at Sewanee to major again in environmental studies, she received a prestigious Doris Duke Fellowship, which takes her all over the country, exploring conservation issues and concerns and giving her opportunities. That's a pretty big deal for anybody, and Leslie takes full advantage of that. The other person on this slide is Amir Suhami from North Chicago. Amir loves being outdoors, and after his participation in CCL, wanted to give back to us. The students receive a scholarship for this program. They don't really have to contribute a lot of financial, there's no financial outlay for them. And he thought he needed to give back. So for every summer during his high school career, Amir came and worked with our restoration ecology interns, college students that do get paid for their work in the summer. He showed up every day. He was one of the only interns that really never missed a day. And we were really happy to hire him last summer as a paid restoration ecology intern before he matriculated at Colorado College. Yari Cortez was one of the students in our first program, went to Bates College to study environmental science. And when she came out of Bates, when she graduated, received a Fulbright scholarship to study.
I know it because I saw you.
Somebody's talking. And then the other person on the slide is Imani Ba, currently a senior at Northwestern University in pre-med. And her focus has been on the intersection between health and nature. And that's something that she wants to pursue as she continues her medical studies. So there are so many stories like this that we could go on and on. But I just want you to know how important it is, how important that CCL exposure was to these kids and how it impacted their lives and through them, their communities and beyond. It's not just a program for 12 to 16 students every summer, but it really goes beyond that. So the question is, this is what we've done for 10 years. And then last year, COVID hit. And as you've heard, CCL is place-based and relies on that initial introductory life-changing trip to underscore connections to nature. It quickly became clear that we were not going to be able to do that in the world of COVID, but we were convinced that it was critical to keep the program going, even if it wasn't in person. And although we couldn't do the hands-on work with the students, we could go deeper in exploring things that our teens cared about. So we had some focus groups. We talked to a lot of students, current students, kids who've been in the program before, families. And we found that what the students wanted was a safe space to hear from racially diverse voices about places and careers that connect to the outdoors. They wanted to understand how nature could be part of many professions, including those not traditionally thought of as outdoors, such as healthcare, city planning, and even yoga. So we created a virtual guest speaker series. We invited people from all over the country who could provide context about conservation and tell us about this path to conservation, this historical path to conservation on whose shoulders we sit. So they talked about John Muir and Aldo Leopold and Sigrid Olsen and Maddie Murray, and to give the kids some ideas. Some of the kids said, I didn't know that conservation had such a history, didn't know that it went back so many years. We followed that with racially diverse speakers who talked about their areas of expertise in conservation, their place in conservation and how they got there. And each speaker produced a short video that the students watched and then came on a Zoom call with the students in the afternoon and had a question and answer with the kids. It was very lively and lots of fun for the students and for all of us. But we didn't want to be all virtual for CCL. So we provided students with a challenge to get outside and explore the green spaces nearest their homes. They saw things they hadn't noticed before, such as the rising and falling water levels of a small creek, the insects that lived in trees, the amount of litter on a bike path. As one student said at the end of the summer, CCL helped me connect what is happening in our own backyards with the rest of the world and taught us to recognize and learn about how the environment is connected. We encouraged the students to talk to their families, to seek out stories from their family history about personal connections in nature, and they noticed the care that some of their families took in creating gardens or caring for natural areas near their home. These are things they hadn't noticed before. One young boy said, my mom always took such pride in growing these bright red flowers in our garden, and I never really understood why or never really noticed them, but they were her connection back to her family history in Mexico. And now it's my goal to care for those and plant those every year. They came away from this whole experience, even during COVID, with a passion for changing and improving these spaces and for learning more. While they did not have the intense experience of that bonding trip, they dove into their action projects with a passion and commitment that matched the groups that had participated in the trips. And this group in this year will go to Northern Wisconsin in June, just a year later. And I think it's going to be an incredible experience for them, given all the things that they've learned this year. So by incorporating and valuing these elements, this is another slide from the Children in Nature Network. The CCL program fosters outcomes that are identified as measures of success in programs focused on youth development and nature. CCL gives the students a sense of agency, a greater self-efficacy and resilience. It gives them a connection to place and community, stronger teen-adult relationships, which are only positive, that sense of belonging and that appreciation for nature. It works on their personal development. They gain greater self-esteem and confidence through the CCL program. And of course, those leadership skills, because not only are we learning about conservation, but we're learning about leadership and what we can do as people to affect a change. So they learn that responsibility, that challenge, that commitment, decision-making ability, teamwork, and flexibility. And really, through all of this, they challenge themselves to a deeper understanding of themselves. That is my presentation on CCL. I would go further, but I know that there are other things to accomplish this afternoon. I would urge you to check out our website. There is a short video on that website that talks about CCL through the voices of the students themselves and the mentors, so you don't have to just take my word for it. I think it's a nice little video that would complement what we've learned here today. So I'm wondering if there are any questions.
Great, Susie. That was just incredible. And I even, as someone very familiar with the program, learned a couple new things. Thank you. There was a question about funding, and I think, maybe you could touch on the work and the years that were involved with the concept and the inception of this program. And we're fortunate that you were the one getting it off the ground, and maybe you could talk about how you've been able to keep it going.
Well, funding is a really important part of CCL, obviously, because as I said early on, we want to remove those financial barriers for the students. And this program is not an inexpensive program to operate, as you can imagine, especially only dealing with 12 to 16 students per year. We have several family foundations that are dedicated to the intersection of environmental education and young people from underserved communities that have been very supportive. We have some corporate support that ebbs and flows, some government support, and then we have donations by people who just want to contribute in some ways. But it's something that we always work on, and it is one of the biggest challenges to the CCL program. So many people think that it's if you say that you're helping students and teaching them about the environment, that would be an easy ask, but it really isn't an easy ask. And when you add, honestly, when you add Lake Forest to the mix, many people feel that we have deep pockets, and it would be, again, easy to do that. But, it's something we continually work on. But we managed to get enough to send the kids to Northern Wisconsin and to support them through their stewardship projects.
Great. I'm not seeing any other questions, but there is an entire screen worth of kudos to you. So make sure you take a look at that before you log off. Anybody else have any questions, or feel free to just speak up at this point too. Okay,
Well, I really thank you all for listening. And, you know, if you want to talk about it offline, I'm happy to talk about the CCL program. I'm very passionate about this, and our whole organization has been involved in this program and is so supportive, from our staff to our board. And I'll tell you, it takes all of that to be able to run a program like this. So thank you all. Come and join us sometime.
Thanks, Susie.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it.
So now the wheels are going to come off officially. We're going into the cocktail hour. I switched my screen over to the gallery view so I could see everybody. So maybe turn on your cameras. Thanks, Sandy. I apologize. This is also the time of day when my dogs start waging their campaign for dinner, and I've got teenagers running through eating every couple of hours. So there might be some background noise. But thanks for sticking around through day 2. Before I forget, tomorrow we are starting at a different time. We're starting at 9, I believe, instead of noon. So a bit earlier. So make sure you get the coffee on early. I know this isn't quite the same as meeting up in the lodge bar afterwards, but I've been told Zoom karaoke can be fun. So I'm gonna lean on Dan for that later. I wanted to give a special thanks to our Oak Tree sponsors again, the Nature Conservancy, Grand Victoria Foundation, Gaylord and Dorothy Donnelly Foundation, and Open Lands. So I'm going to kick this off. I'm going to try and channel my inner Allie Ringhouse, and but I don't have any stories about bats or gas stations or marinas even. So I'll do my best. It's certainly been a tough year. Locally, we even had to say goodbye to a couple of my personal conservation heroes, but we've made many new great friends as well. I'm going to tell you, I hope Leslie's not on this call anymore because of this story, but my organization successfully completed our 3rd round of accreditation with LTA this year. And this one was the first one entirely with me at the helm. And it was my first time working within their web platform, Civicor, and it was pretty interesting. There was one particularly panicky week for me when I could not find the deed for a 20-acre piece for one of our patchwork preserves. As with many of our projects, our acquisition affiliate, the Lake Forest Land Foundation, which is also accredited, so I actually had to do 2 accreditations last year, acquired the parcel. And then eventually we transfer these parcels back to Lake Forest Open Lands. But this project dates back to 1988, which according to my math, I would have been busy in the 4th grade, reading Where the Red Fern Grows and developing my love for dogs. So it was before my time. But anyway, after a week of digging, we eventually did find the deed transfer. And it was just a funny few days of thinking, do we actually own this thing? And it all worked out. And it's another great example of how the standards and practices with accreditation can help, especially for somebody like me, that next generation steward with your parcel management. So now if anybody else would like to share in the style of Allie's big wrap up, feel free to jump in. We're going to have several breakout rooms set up. So if folks want to catch up in a more private setting, you'll be able to do that too. Maybe Jamie could explain that a little bit. And I'm gonna go on mute now. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, everybody, for coming. I hope everything was good for you all on the tech side. I was trying to admit people as quickly as I could. So hopefully that all went well for you. I'm going to open up like 50 breakout rooms right now. I have labeled one for anybody who wants to talk about webinars, and I've labeled that. All the rest aren't going to have labels. So, if you see somebody you want to catch up with, maybe send them a note in the chat and just say, hey, I'll meet you in breakout room 36. Or just join a random breakout room if you'd like. So, but it was so good to see all of you. I know this conference several years ago is where I met most of you for the first time. So it's always near and dear to my heart. So I'm going to go ahead and open those breakout rooms now. And I hope to chat with you all soon.
Boy, are we getting fancy. Just a quick note, I put the link for tomorrow's conference in the chat. In case you've misplaced it in emails or anything, maybe you can copy it and paste it in your calendar for easy access tomorrow morning. Because I do the same thing, even though I complain about everybody losing the links, I do too. But if you want to copy it, maybe paste it in your calendar, and then everybody be ready to go tomorrow morning. And I can put the evaluation link again too. I've put it a couple of times, and you won't have to scroll around for it. So I'll do that for you.
Thanks, Sandy. Another round of applause for everybody that presented today, especially the virtual events. I was really impressed with the resilience of this group, the brain trust of everybody involved. It's just I'm very thankful for the ability to share all that information. It was really nice.
We're a bunch of resilient, creative people. Impressive.
Can we say thank you to the board for putting on this amazing show? I know it's no small feat, never mind having to create a totally new template. So thank you guys for making it happen under incredibly challenging circumstances, and it's been phenomenal.